For the Knox County Board of Education. Another rainy evening on a Board of Education meeting night. We're going to start with a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance led by Ms. Sanger.
Moment of silence. Face the flag. Salute. Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Couple announcements tonight. Due to unforeseen circumstances, the Ethics Committee meeting scheduled for this afternoon had to be rescheduled to Wednesday, February 17th at 4 p.m. The Ethics Committee members are Ms. Fugit, Ms. Hill, and Ms. Roundtree. Ms. Roundtree has recused herself from the hearing of this particular complaint, and Mrs. Carson has graciously said that she'll serve in her absence. The Joint Education Committee is scheduled to meet this Thursday, February 4th at 4:30 p.m. in this Andrew Johnson Building boardroom. Knox County has tentatively scheduled the groundbreaking events for our new Gibbs and Hardin Valley Middle Schools for Tuesday, February 9th. More detailed information about the time will be forthcoming. And I think we have one elected official here tonight, Chairman Dave Wright, Commissioner Dave Wright. He's here tonight. Thank you for joining us, as always, Commissioner. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Yeah. No changes. I have a motion by Ms. Dethridge and a second by Ms. Sanger. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. Dr. McIntyre, Superintendent's report.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Start with making sure the board is notified that we've got our Career Day coming up for our students. More than 80 area employers and colleges will participate in the annual Knox County Schools Career Day for 8th through 12th grade students on February 18th from 4 p.m. till 7 p.m. at the Knoxville Expo Center. That's on Clinton Highway. The event is free and it's open to all Knox County schools, 8th grade students, high school students, and their parents. This is an annual event. It provides a chance for students to become acquainted with employment opportunities in the area and to interact with people in many different occupations and career fields. In addition, several area community colleges, universities, and technical schools will have representatives on hand to discuss post-secondary education as well. Interested students and parents may visit the Knox County Schools website for a full list of employers and colleges who are participating in Career Day, and that's our website at knoxschools.org. We've got the Teacher of the Year celebration coming up. Each year, the district recognizes some outstanding pre-K through grade 12 educators as part of the Tennessee Teacher of the Year program. These teachers are nominated by their colleagues to be honored for their commitment, educational leadership, and outstanding teaching. From this group of exceptional educators, 3 of them, one from each grade band, will be selected to go on to compete at the state level for the State Teacher of the Year recognition. Our Teacher of the Year celebration is scheduled for the evening of February 23rd at the Holiday Inn downtown. And I want to let the board know that February is Magnet School Awareness Month, an initiative that celebrates magnet schools and the impact that they have on the lives of our students and communities across the country. In an effort to achieve to support this effort, the Knox County Schools has 9 magnet school options spanning elementary, middle, and high school programs that we wish to showcase during this month. These magnet schools offer the same rigorous curriculum as other schools, but also integrate specialized themes to meet the learning interests and needs and strengths of every one of our children. As part of this commemoration, magnet schools will offer special events, and each of our magnet schools will host an open house this month. The dates and times of those open houses and those events are also listed on our website at knoxschools.org. And Mr. Chairman, that completes my report.
In record time. Ms. Roundtree.
Could you repeat what the starting time was for the Teacher of the Year banquet?
I don't think I said what the starting time was for the Teacher of the Year banquet. It's on
I didn't
February
think you did.
23rd. It's usually around 6, isn't it? Yeah, 6 o'clock, yes.
Thank you.
6 p.m., and that is at the Holiday Inn downtown, correct? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McIntyre. I noticed Commissioner Smith has joined us tonight too, so welcome to him as well. Thank you. So now we'll go over the regular agenda for Wednesday night's meeting. We'll start with contracts. I guess we'll just go through each one of these. Item D1. Any questions? Item D2. Item D3. Ms. Sanger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see that, we have 13 high schools, and I just want to make sure that, I know that some high schools like Austin East, and Gloria, you may be able to help me out also, have also had financial assistance with students taking AP courses, and I know that somehow Central didn't apply for it several years ago for assistance, but I would just like us to keep in mind that I think there are several students in Knox County schools that need assistance for AP courses, and I just want to make sure that we continue to address those. I know that students at Central were helped last year, and that this fee extension, pilot program will help other high schools. I just want to make sure that we keep in mind that anyone who wants to take an AP course can take it without having worrying about not being able to pay for it.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Sanger, you're absolutely right. We want to make sure we encourage all of our students to be able to take advanced placement courses and assessment and the exams. And this is a great pilot program on the part of the state that did target some specific schools, but there are also some federal resources that are available, and we certainly will work with our school principals to make sure that they are aware of those resources and taking full advantage.
Ms. Roundtree.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a question about the AP exam. I know it was moved, I know it used to be given twice a year, and now it's only given, my understanding, once a year? No?
Once.
It's always been once? Okay. The parent that told me that was misinformed. So is there anything, I guess, study tools in place for kids that are taking an AP course like in fall semester, and then they're not taking that AP exam until the end of the year? Are there review sessions? I guess that was sort of the parent's concern to me. How do they help their child retain that knowledge if there's a gap between when they finish their AP course and take the AP exam?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Yes, Ms. Roundtree, most schools will run study sessions in the spring, particularly for the students who took the class in the fall, and just to keep them up to speed in preparation for the actual exam.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Carson.
When you were just saying about funds being available, is that for all schools? I mean, I know this, on this agenda is not, but is that available to all schools?
There are federal funds that are available for, my understanding, and Dr. Alves can fill in the blanks, primarily for students who are eligible for free and reduced lunch at any school. And so those resources, since we have students who are eligible at every school, those resources would be available at every school.
Yeah, I guess and I understood it when it was a 2-year program and now a 3rd year. But at some point, we've got middle-class families who can't meet free and reduced lunch, students at Farragut who will take as many as 4 AP courses or more in a year, and at $91 a shot, what they do is choose which ones they can afford to do. And so, I guess at some point, that there's an assumption that, oh, we can afford it, but you also have to remember these are the students who are paying for lunch, and these are the students who are paying for every other fee that exists in Knox County schools. So I would never vote against this, but I think that those people should not be forgotten. I know many who have to choose which AP test they're going to take, because $500 in addition to everything else surely adds up.
Good point. Ms. Fugit.
Thank you. My question was, who selected these schools?
Those were the schools that were included by the state legislature in the pilot.
That's what I wanted to make clear, that it was the state legislature that picked the schools, not the Knox County Board of Education. Thank you.
Ms. Gabrielson, did you have anything, or you good now? Okay. All right, any other questions? D4, Dr. McIntyre.
Mr. Chairman, just D4 and D5 are similar. These are agreements with universities for student teaching experiences.
No questions? D6, was that it?
That's a agreement for clinical experience for our students. We did about like 400 of those last month, but this one was one that wasn't on that list, so it should be
Okay.
fairly routine.
D7. D8. D9.
Mr.
Ms.
Chairman, I'll
Etheridge,
just
yeah.
ask a quick question.
Mhm.
When they're purchasing technology, I thought they're already a one-to-one, so what is technology that's needing to be purchased with the PTA funds? That's just all my question.
Yeah, we can just take a look at the details of it. Ms. Baird may be with us this evening, or perhaps Mr. Oakes can speak to it. You're talking about Beard Middle School in particular. Ms. Etheridge?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, the middle school.
Yeah, the backup documentation shows they're purchasing 13 MacBook, 15 MacBook Pros, and those are not necessarily for student use. It could be for staff use as well. So even though they're a one-to-one school, they still require technology outside what's provided to the student.
Okay, I just wanted to, make that clear so everybody will understand why they're purchasing additional technology.
Okay, any other questions? D10. Okay, so we'll move on to board policies, 7A. Dr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there are quite a few board policies in Section 7, and that's the result of some excellent conversation and dialogue at the policy review meeting last week. And first, item 7A is really a reconfiguration of the numbering format and structure of school board policies. You'll see as we get further down into item K and item L that there are, we have policy IDFB and policy IDDB. And the idea is, we'll keep the lettered sections, so we'll still have a section A and a section B and a section C to put a number to those policies, so that it's just not as awkward and cumbersome a numbering structure or a nomenclature structure for the policies. And then, of course, item 7B through 7O would be the actual policies themselves, and we can certainly talk through each of those individually.
Ms. Roundtree.
I just want to comment, the librarian in me is very happy about the renumbering of the policies. I think that's going to make it easier for folks outside the board, for the general public, to search the policies and find what they need to find, because the current numbering and ordering is a little cumbersome. So thank you.
Okay, board policy 7B, school district planning goals and objectives. Any questions? Ms. Fugit?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. McIntyre, if you could just sort of highlight the why behind some of these changes as we go through, I think that's very helpful, and then so that we understand why, we can read the revisions, but what's the thinking behind it, that would be appreciated.
Absolutely. If I can also note, Mr. Chairman, there is on this renumbering schedule also a suggested calendar of when each of these policy sections would be reviewed. It sort of just took them in order, and we might want to think about reconfiguring that slightly, just because a couple of them are really big, and you may not want to be taking them up in March and April when the budget is happening. But generally, it's just an idea that to be a school board of distinction, TSBA requires an annual review of all policies, and so we thought the group that had that conversation thought they'd put together at least a preliminary calendar of what that could look like, so that can happen on a regular basis.
Okay, any other questions? 7C, school day.
So this is, and I'm going to ask Dr. Davis and Dr. Alves to jump in and help me where I need it. But this one is, basically, the policy had a separate section on kindergarten and talked about our school day for kindergarten, and our school day for kindergarten is the same as our school day for elementary school now, so it just strikes the part that talks about kindergarten.
Thank you. 7D, Ms. Sanger. Appeals and appearances before the board is the policy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We actually have had in the past just one, it was a BCBI, and it was appeals to and appearances before the board. And when you read through it all, it just was sort of confusing exactly what was public forum, what was expected at public forum, and then also if you had a complaint or an appeal to go before the board, what the process was for that. And so I brought this up for discussion, I guess, at our last month, to see if everyone thought that we should possibly explore separating the two. And it was suggested that I actually bring it up for discussion at our meeting last week. That was public notice that a bunch of, actually I think Ms. Deathridge, Terry Hill, was there with some other staff members, and we all talked about how it might be beneficial to separate the two so there's less confusion. And also Attorney Gary Dupler from our law department was there, and he also thought it was a good idea just to have them separated so it's just clarified. Having said that, what we did to this particular policy is there's so much red and everything striked out because we did take part of it out to switch to the next item on the agenda. So it's almost easier for me just to look at the final revision. But basically what we did do is we addressed, we had appeals before the complaints, and so we thought the natural process of that would be actually to have complaints first and then address the appeals after that. And then also there was some discussion on Knox County School employees, what their process is for a complaint as opposed to a non-governmental employee. So we just wanted to make sure that we specified that so that there was no ambiguity and everyone knew what the correct procedure was. And so that was actually in lines 5 through 8, and it actually states for Knox County Schools employees to go to their handbook and policy GAE so that they can be easily found for their reference also. But other than that, like the complaint section was the same the whole way down, and also the appeals basically was the same as well. So that's all we did is we just separated that, and then we just added just for Knox County employees to know where to find it in their handbook as well. And I don't know if it would be easier if you want me to go to the next one to talk about how I split that up, or I'm fine with talking about this one right now.
Yeah, let's just talk about this one for right now.
Okay.
Ms. Roundtree.
I have a question. I'm looking at the policy, the complaints and appeals to the board, that one. And I'm not sure, I know that a lot of this was cut and moved, but on page 2, starting with line 3, that paragraph, I don't know if that was that included in the previous policy? Okay. I just wasn't sure. And I guess maybe we haven't necessarily been following that. I think complaint can be is a subjective term, but I do know that, for example, when there was discussion about maybe testing or parent concerns about that, I think, those folks still want to be heard, even though obviously it's probably not a decision that the principal could make or even that we could make here locally, but I do think it's important for those folks if they want to be able to speak and share that with us so we can kind of take it to the state rep.
Right.
Or whomever.
And we talked about that too during our discussion last week also, that necessarily, like if you're going to give an opinion on the SAT 10 or things like that, then that's not necessarily a complaint, that's an opinion.
Yeah, that's why I want to make sure people understand.
Right.
That, for things that are maybe broader than what this board could vote on, they're still welcome to come speak and share that with us so we know what's going on in their school.
Right. Thank you for clarifying that.
Dr. McIntyre?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Ms. Sanger, so my understanding of these two policies is that really very little, if any, of the language is actually changed. It's just really rearranging the sections and then splitting it out into two policies. Is that an accurate characterization?
That is correct. We added a couple other little things in the public forum policy, but yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I like the changes. It seems like it's much more clear, so good job.
Can I ask another question?
Yes.
Or wait, are we
Go ahead.
on and just looking at the proposed new public forum policy? is
Wait a
there any-
second, let me just,
Oh. Are we-
Ms. Bounds, do you want to talk about the,
I just had a question, because I wasn't able to be at that meeting. Online, I had several lines here designated, but the one that addressed how far in advance, was that in the old policy as well, that it had to be 7 days prior? That just seems like a long time to me to, I don't know. If,
It was in the previous policy, yes.
yeah, okay, so the complaint must be submitted in writing to the director of schools not later than 12 noon, 7 days prior to the regular meeting of the board. I just didn't realize it was such a long period of time.
One thing that we talked about too, because that was in the previous policy, but one thing we did address too is that if it's a formal complaint as opposed to an opinion, one thing that they want to make sure is that if a complaint comes before to the director of schools, that question can be disseminated to different areas to get all the information back in time, is what they were talking about.
Thank you.
any other questions? Okay, we'll move to 7F, 7E, public forum. Ms. Sanger.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This basically is almost exactly the same as well. One thing that we just separated, but one thing that we did try and add is that we had talked about before, that the vice chair, somewhere down the road, the vice chair had taken on the responsibility of public forum, but it wasn't reflecting that in this policy. So we put that the vice chair basically runs the board, but also we wanted to make sure that the chair also has input on that as well. So, but also one thing too that we wanted to make sure, because we talked about this, and again, Mr. Dupler thought this was reasonable, that one thing that had been happening to our board secretary is, because we said that they just people had to sign up for public forum before 5 minutes till 5 through email or phone call. Well, what was happening was Ms. Coatney was in here or across the street trying to set up for our meetings and would miss a couple of them. So what we decided would be a reasonable amount of time would be, because the agenda is published, the Thursday night before, prior to the meeting on Monday or Wednesday, to where it just says on 13 that to contact, if you would like to seek, addressing the board during public forum, just on 13, it says, let the board secretary know via telephone or email no later than 12 noon on the day of the scheduled meeting, or by speaking to the board vice chair in person prior to the start of the meeting. And then it still says, though, that the chair does have, then if you go down to line 20, it does still say that the chair may also recognize individuals who've not arranged to speak prior to the meeting if he so decides, but a majority vote of members present can still override that decision of the chair. And then the other thing too, the only other changes, really, we did keep the 5 minutes on there also. With that, I just want to make sure that everybody understands too, that with having said that there are many districts in our state that only allow public forum once a month, or it's 3 minutes during that once a month, or it could be 30 minutes total, and then with 3 minutes, but if more than 10 people sign up, you get less time than that. So, I think as a whole, our board is very generous to the public and listening, and because we want to have their input. And so I just want to make sure that, we said that. And then also, on lines 27 through 34, it just basically says, because it did, said that the chair had the option to ask someone to, stop speaking, or to correct someone who's actually being disrespectful, or, you know, it also talks about, and so we just added that the vice chair is on there as well, since the vice chair is running, so it just says vice chair or chair. And then it just sort of reminds, still the same, reminds everyone to just address the chairman when speaking, is basically all that is. And those are pretty much those are the only changes that were done.
Thank you for that work. Ms. Fugit?
Thank you. Ms. Sanger, I noticed it says that before each person speaks, they'll state their name, county of residence, and topic. You know, we've typically asked for name and address, so is this kind of what we're going to? This may be what was in the policy that we weren't doing, but I like that.
Well, what we had said is, a couple of times before, we had said some people had just written their address, but we weren't sure if they were
Right,
county
right.
residents. And then all of a sudden, they get up and they speak, and they're from Sevier County. And in our policy, it's been in the past that we don't have to, as a board, hear someone that does not reside from Knox County. But we also talked in that meeting that if someone has students here or works here, but just doesn't reside here, then yeah, we want to hear from them, and we just want to know that.
Ms. Roundtree?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify too, the first paragraph, the language looks a little bit different. Oops, I lost the window. Were there some changes made to the language in the first paragraph where it starts with individuals seeking to appear before the board? Let me get back to I'm trying to flip between the BCBI and then the new one. I think,
Can you find it on the red line sheet? Because that was what was so hard, like, once we did all this, like, it was hard for me to even get, here it is. It starts actually on line 19. No, it's not on 19. But no, it was pretty much, I could be mistaken, but if it's not exact, it's pretty much the same.
okay, let me,
I can't find it on here.
okay, I have both of them pulled up in the little window now. I think what was
One thing,
what that looked different to me was that the line on line 4, meetings may occur on occasion when the chair deems it in the best interest of the district to not include public forum, and then a majority of voting members present can overrule the decision of the chair. Is that?
And we did talk about that as a group too, Ms. Roundtree, and it just was, there were certain meetings too that have been held in the past where there may not be public forum, and we don't statutorily have to have a public forum, and this was just so we don't have our hands tied to where if ever something happened where we couldn't do that.
Okay. Is there any possibility in the new policy that if we could get maybe just not even a red line, but just maybe like the lines highlighted that were changed?
Well, this is a brand-new policy, so because we're taking from an old policy, so it
I
really
know,
wouldn't
but
be.
What Ms. Sanger said was that most of it was cut and pasted, but then
Yeah.
the bulk of it was cut and pasted, but some of the language had been changed. I think it would be just a little bit simpler if we could look at, I don't know if that's what you have. Is that what you have in front of you, or do you just have the red line of the
I just have,
old
I have
policy?
the red line, what we talked about. Do you have an issue in particular with that first paragraph, 1, 2 through 6?
Well, I was just in reading the policy and reviewing it, trying to look and see what all had been changed so I can review it thoroughly. That was the part that I noticed that the wording had been changed a little bit. So I know when you mentioned before, the other lines I easily found. I just didn't know if there were other things that had been changed. But if you can't provide it, that's fine. I can go through with the highlighter and do it. I just wanted folks to know that first paragraph is different than what we've previously had.
Okay. Ms. Carson?
I noticed that both of these don't have the law director's thing on it that's on every other policy. Is it not legal to form, or is there concern?
No, Mr. Dupler sat in our meeting, and he actually said that he gave his approval and said he really liked it and that he was glad that we were doing it. So to make sure it was more, to clarify everything.
Yeah, but that happened for years, and that didn't
Right, I
prove
know,
to
but
be
no, he
effective,
has no,
so
you're right, there
Can
is
we get
no,
that before Wednesday?
Yep.
It's
We'll
the
ask-
only
yeah, we'll ask
policy
for
on
that.
here, it's the only two that don't have that.
If you're talking two different things, if you're talking a forum, you can have a forum, you don't have to, that's all policy. If the policy isn't in contradiction with state law, that's what we would approve. Whether or not we approve of taking out or modifying public forum, we're not going to enter into that.
I'm not
That's purely
asking for
policy.
that, I'm asking on every other policy on here, at the bottom is a footnote that it's signed off by the law department as to legal to form, and these two don't have it.
That's correct. We didn't draw them up.
But
if Mr. Dupler's in the meeting though, and he says everything's fine, then
Yeah.
I guess I was just
Let me-
assuming that would, okay,
Let
fine.
Mr. Dupler address what he said was fine. He's back here. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Dupler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As far as the meeting went, I certainly did say that separating these two policies is an excellent idea. And we did discuss some of the various changes to the policies. But obviously, I didn't write the policies, so I didn't, say that they were legal or not. I think, as Mr. Book has said, it's really a policy decision. I mean, it's not contrary to state law to have public forum or not have public forum. So it's really up to this board as to what they want to do with it.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Ms. Carson.
for years, we had the law department represented at every agenda meeting and policy revision meeting that we had, and we discussed whether there were concerns, legal concerns, those kind of things at each one of these. In the past year and a half, the issue came up with grants specifically, and also some other things that suddenly were outside of what would be legal to form. And the board requested probably 6 or 7 months ago, and I'm not sure exactly that time frame, that the law department review and say legal to form. It had nothing to do with who wrote it. I mean, frankly, most of these aren't really written. The revisions are discussed, and I don't want 3 months from now to hear, oh, the board did this, or the director did this, and it's against, there's some infraction. Is there a reason the law department can't say whether this is legal to form? I'm not at all asking that the law department speak to the policy the board chooses. That's clear that that's in the board's responsibility and duty. But I find it unsettling that every single policy we've passed since that time, we've looked for that notation on the bottom, and these two don't have it.
I don't know why these two don't have it. I don't think there's any problem signing off as to legal form.
That's all I'm asking.
Because
And that's done by Wednesday.
these policies are, up to the board. I mean, whether you strike part of this policy or add to this policy or what have you, we don't see any problem with the state statutes, which was my role at that policy meeting, was to say, okay, if there's a problem with the state statute, hey, we need to modify that language.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
that's all I'm asking. I mean, because there are a number of policies the board has that don't necessarily have a law that demands that the board do it, but we just have committed, I believe, as a board we want those run through the law department, legal to form, not whether you agree or disagree on a policy. So, I mean, can that be done by Wednesday?
I believe so.
If you will get to us the form that you want with that added, because we don't have the word product, it was drafted somewhere else, not in our office.
Well, it's
If
on
you
the
wa-
agenda.
I know it's on the agenda. If you will get it to us in the form that you want and put that at the bottom, we will be more than happy to sign
Thank
off on
you.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bounds?
I have two questions. The first one is if you could just maybe speak to the discussion that occurred where on lines 4 and 5, it's not that I'm in opposition to it, I just want to know what the discussion was where it says meetings may occur on occasion when the chair deems it in the best interest of the district to not include public forums. So whoever was there can speak to that. Or give an example of, if y'all had examples that were discussed in that meeting?
If it's okay with you, Ms. Bounds or Mr. Chairman Harris, can I ask Ms. Courtney just to clarify that? Because we had talked about that, and you had given a couple of examples when Ms. Hill, Ms. Hill was there as well.
Well, I was just going to say,
Okay.
I know one of the examples cited was when approval had to be given for maybe some type of contract. They couldn't move forward without the board's approval. It was really more of a logistical type of situation as opposed to something that might appear to have controversy in any way. It was more the mechanics of it all, is what I recall out of that discussion.
Okay, second? Yes, I was just interested, and maybe Mr. Davis could speak to that, because I've heard several comments here. And Ms. Sanger said a lot of it was cut and pasted, but then there were some changes to it. So how was this particular public forum policy? Was it written by staff? Was it written by?
Well, this policy that's before you actually came from the Policy Review Committee members that were present that day, and so it was a collaborative effort, and so it was written based on the input from board members as well as staff members that were present.
Okay, so you just took and kind of moved everything over and started discussing it and adding and deleting and the people that were there?
Correct. We took basically the policy as it was and went through it and talked about, and I think Ms. Singer had some ideas about separating it out, and so we talked through that and as a group decided that what changes needed to be made and pretty much collaboratively agreed on the policy that is before you.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Dethridge?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just getting back to what Ms. Carson was talking about when she's talking about approved as to legal form, it's on everyone, and it's on some that all they did was struck out high school or whatever corresponded, but they did approve it as legal form. So it just seems like it's a formality and it shouldn't be a big issue as far as just putting it on the bottom of those policies. So I'm in agreement. Just look over it, and we didn't have any problems with it. I don't see any reason why you can't just put those 3 lines on the bottom of those 2 policies by Wednesday.
Thank you. Ms. Roundtree?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to point out, I didn't know if it mattered or not if the descriptor code and information wasn't in that top upper corner. I didn't know if that just needed to be added before we vote on Wednesday.
I think the whole thing was that we were trying, until we vote, until it becomes a policy, it doesn't become a number. And then we were also holding off on it as well because we were going through that whole new transition.
Yeah, and that's what I saw, that it had a new number, but it wasn't listed there. And then I guess I just had a general question. I wasn't at the most recent policy meeting, but the first policy meeting, are there still policies that were discussed at that meeting that we're awaiting revisions on? I don't know who can address that.
I think there's one additional policy in the A section that we have to address. I think it's policy, it's basically dealing with the board authority, basically the board's authority. We have to, there was some discussion about that, and I think that the law department had some discussion related to one portion of that they wanted to address before we move forward with that.
There were also a number of policies from Section I that still need to be reviewed as well.
Okay, that's what I was, the one I was thinking of was from I, so when would we expect to see those on the agenda? I don't know. Who could answer that?
We actually have scheduled, I believe, 3 additional policy review committee meetings, and so we plan on discussing those as we go through those different sections during those meetings.
I guess I was thinking of a policy that we actually already discussed in the first review meeting. So anything that we discussed in the first review meeting, should be on this list. Am I understanding that correctly? No?
No, not all policies that were discussed in the first review meeting are actually on the agenda this evening. There's still some needed changes in just a few of those policies, so we will work through those changes in the next review meeting.
Okay, thank you.
So I've got a question. Is there an appetite to discuss moving 5 minutes to 3 minutes? I mean, I think that some of our meetings have become so long and laborious that it affects the ability for the board to make decisions. In our voting meetings, when we've had, 40 people sign up and take off 5 minutes, I know I see board members get tired, and I think frankly that the ability for us to have discourse on the item is diminished because we're just worn out after listening for 2 hours. So, I think it's worth talking about. I mean, ultimately, the objective of these meetings is us to make good decisions. And we have a lot of ways that people can contact us. They have our cell phone numbers. We get emails. We talk to people in meetings. I meet people for breakfast, lunch. And I don't think giving somebody 5 minutes, especially when we have, 20, 30, sometimes we've had 40 individuals come up and speak, it just turns the meeting into something that I think is not beneficial to the board. So, Ms. Fugit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, having been the chair when we had those take place, I sympathize, but that has typically been the exception. I don't know what will happen in the future, but I think if we want mutiny, we cut it to 3 minutes. 5 minutes is fine. I would like that for people who are going to speak on the same topic to perhaps have a spokesperson, but I don't feel very strongly about it one way or the other. If this board wants to do 3 minutes, that's fine. Most school boards in the state do 3 minutes, but I think our city council does 3 minutes and maybe county commission does 5. I'm not sure, so I don't have strong feelings one way or the other.
Yeah, Ms. Sanger.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. We also discussed that as well, and we actually had some cute little laughs about making sure that we fill up 5 minutes, But one thing that we did talk about too is that hopefully, what we were hoping to try first is that since we have, if both of these are approved, and it splits that up, there's just more clarity on what you should be talking about during public forum, and then that way you wouldn't have, it would just be, with the clarification on this, you could possibly say what you wanted to say in less than 5 minutes, but, you're to allot that time, I'm fine with trying. We said we would try this and see what happens, and then sort of just go from there.
Okay. Ms. Bounds?
Oh, I'd like to leave it at 5 minutes at least and see how it plays out this next year. It may be a totally different look. I mean, and like you said, Ms. Puget, it's not always that long, and I feel like that's just part of our service to the public.
Ms. Carson?
The only thing I would add is there are some boards that have a practice of when it's greater than 30 minutes already signed up to go to 3-minute increments. So if you know that you already have, the board could put in policy, if greater than 8 people, so 8 times 5 is 40 minutes, the chair, with approval of the board, can change form to 3-minute increments or something. It is just always something to consider, because the few times that you do have that many people, it's usually the same topic. So it does get a bit redundant, and I'm thinking back to some book issues we've had and things like that, and the ability to change to a 3-minute format gives everybody the chance to be heard without taking a meeting on to midnight. I know that commission, a number of years ago when we went through a budget request and there was a number of community members, they changed theirs to 3 minutes to try to accommodate people. I would think you could probably suspend rules without it being in policy and do it, but it would be nice to let people know ahead of time. And I would say generally in all of these, if anybody's got something that's different and the board, feels the need to hear it, the board member can always move to extend that person's time. But just a thought.
Okay. Ms. Gabrielson?
Yeah, I think I remember that we discussed enforcing, like, if there's a group, just having one speaker. So I think that'll also streamline the process if you keep it at 5 minutes, because you will, like, if you have a large group and you know they're from the same area, it says in the policy. So that's one way I think we can go in the future and keep the 5 minutes.
Ms. Carson?
So I agree, but one of the problems is how do you define a group?
Right.
And, generally, when you have a number of speakers signed up, it's the same topic, and they want to get their say. So I think it sounds good, but the truth is, if you read our policy, the board has no ability to enforce, limit it to, because generally, groups want to be heard too, and it's a topic that needs to be heard and not necessarily a spokesperson for a topic. So I think it's kind of a false comfort that's not really there. It doesn't give the board any leeway to really address that.
Ms. Roundtree?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Carson, I'm not sure if you know the answer to this. Do you know if the places that do that, do they just make an announcement then at the beginning of the meeting? That way folks, I guess, that come with prepared remarks know, I need to maybe line through what I have or edit what I'm going to say. I guess, do they typically announce it at the beginning of the meeting? I'm not sure.
I think Oak Ridge is one of them, and I think they do that. I would also say that as people sign up, Terry could say, oh, you're speaker number 12, so be aware that it may be changed to 3 minutes. So I think there would be ways to do that, to have that mechanism in place. I'm not advocating for it because frankly, I don't have that many more to go through. So I think the future board can make that decision.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I brought it up because I don't have very many meetings to go through as well, and so I don't want it to be perceived as something just for me. I'm thinking of future boards that I think it's important that these meetings are run in a timely fashion and that we have people that continue to want to serve on school board and not be here for 5 hours when they, have jobs to get up to in the next morning. And so I think it's important that we're cognizant of what we're doing. Ms. Hill?
I appreciate your comments. If those board members that were at the policy review meeting that we had would have appreciated very much our laughter in our spirit of compromise. We were trying to listen to Ms. Fugate from last month and did in fact agree to keep the 5 minutes. And just for the record, I have a real difficult time trying to limit anyone from speaking. I do understand that that people are tired and there are a lot of other things going on, but I feel very strongly that we were elected to represent the people, and a big part of that is hearing the people. And just because maybe 4, 6, or 8 others have spoken on a topic, sometimes as a parent or a citizen, you just feel that you need to have your say too, and I that's just a right and a privilege that, assuming everyone else is following the rules, we're not being ugly and that kind of thing, that we need to continue to allow as a board. That's Terry Hill's opinion.
Ms. Dethridge?
And getting back to what Terry said, we did have a lot of joyous moments, but one of them was when I made the statement that you have up to 5 minutes. So when somebody says, well, I'm done, but I got 2 more minutes to talk, no. We need to make sure they understand they don't really have 2 more minutes. It states that you have up to 5 minutes. And if you finished ahead of time, it'd be nice if you just go ahead and finish it and sit down and let somebody else come on up. So it doesn't happen very often, yeah. But we just want to make sure everybody understands that it is up to 5 minutes. You don't have to do 5 minutes.
And I would just state for the record too, there's a lot of different elected bodies in the United States, and very few of them have public forums. So, it's not necessarily in our Constitution that we have to take our public meetings to make them public forums. Again, there's many ways that people can contact us that are, really a lot more beneficial than somebody coming up in one-way communication, which public forum is. I would always prefer to speak to somebody, one-on-one, so I can, understand what they're saying. So, okay, let's move on to, Ms. Sanger. Final word.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I apologize, Ms. Gabrielson, Sydney Gabrielson, our student rep, was also at the meeting, and I kept saying Gloria, Terry, and I, and staff, and I didn't recognize you, and I apologize.
7F, instructional goals and objectives. Dr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 7F and 7G are just a recognition of the nomenclature of our state standards changing from Common Core state standards to Tennessee standards. And so that's, I believe, the only change in both of those. And then course credit outside the base high school eliminates the reference to correspondence courses, since we don't believe we have any correspondence courses anymore. Cooperative programs I'll stop there and see if there's any questions.
Any questions? Nope. Go ahead.
No questions, but I did have a laugh on that. Just, I have to make, because Sydney's such a good sport, when she looked at us and said, well, what are correspondence courses? Yeah, it was dated.
Item I is cooperative programs, and so that's really putting into policy some of the language around work-based learning that we talked about at the mid-month meeting most recently, and we had the presentation on that at the mid-month January meeting. I don't know if there's any questions about that. And then the next one is enrollment in college level courses. And really the change there is to just make a couple of minor language changes. And in particular, the language prior to this referred to only 11th or 12th grade students. And now the reference is just to high school students as opposed to just 11th or 12th grade students. So that brings us to gifted and talented. And so there are a number of changes there. Dr. Alves, you may want to characterize this one since I was not there for the discussion, and there are some substantial changes there.
Yes, thank you, Dr. McIntyre. I think some of the initial changes you'll see are just nomenclature, changing vocational to career and technical education. And then the rest of the changes really speak to the way that we identify students for our gifted and talented programs. And those are delineated by grade band, as well as our instructional model for serving our students in gifted and talented program. We use a coaching model. We do have some distance learning activities that were piloted last year and are really doing well in many of our schools this year. And so most of the changes you'll see speak specifically to those changes.
Ms. Roundtree.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In reading through the policy, and I had just some comments on what Dr. Alves mentioned, just about the gifted and talented program utilizing the technology for distance learning and self-paced courses. I think that's wonderful that we have that option out there. I just also am just a little bit, I don't want it to be in the policy and then that be a way that we can, I know that department has been through a lot of changes in there. You know, those coaches have a lot of schools and a lot of kids they serve, but I think part of what is great for kids that are in TAG, as it was called when I was in school, was just that human interaction too with the teacher and the relationships that can be built between the peers working together and also with the additional teacher there, particularly in the elementary level. So I just had a little bit of concern about that, and some folks had also reached out to me and said, you know, why has the gifted and talented program sort of, I don't think it's gone away. It's just those folks have more, I feel like, area they cover now, it seems like, than what it was in the past, so.
Okay. Ms. Dethridge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and that was a lot of discussion at the meeting we had on the policy. And if you hear the presentation on the way they're the way they're trying to handle this situation with gifted and talented, I asked Mr. Davis if we could even have them come in on a mid-month and explain what they're doing, the gifted and talented program, because I think it's something that we don't really understand, but it is a lot to it, and they're doing some good things with it, with the limited amount of money we have, because that's why we don't have as many people as we need. So, but some of the things that Daphne, Dr. Odom is doing is good. And I think it'd be great for us to have her to come out and explain it to us so that we could better understand the gifted and talented program as a whole.
It's a good idea. Okay. Ms. Gabrielson?
Yeah, I had a lot of questions as well because when I was in school, the gifted and talented program, like we were pulled out of class. And just comparing what I heard and my experience personally, I think there is a lot of success with pulling students out of class, and not that you could bring that back entirely, but in the future, just thinking about how you can integrate that as well with trying to get all students enriched in some way or doing it through the technology, because the only way I advanced in school at the rapid pace that I did was because I was pulled out and taught extra things instead of just like given individual learning criteria. And I think that's a big part of the gifted and talented program.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. McIntyre? Yeah, sports examination. Oh,
All right.
Tracy again? I'm not listening, but you gotta hit me like this.
And also with what Ms. Gabrielson was speaking of, we also talked about, or I guess Dr. Odom also talked about how some schools do choose to pull out certain groups, but they may not just all be what you would consider gifted and talented, but it would be mixed groups together at different points throughout the year, and also maybe different levels of kids at different types of the year. So in some schools, from my understanding, I mean, Dr. Alves, maybe you might want to, or I guess Dr. McIntyre, approach this, but also just that there are smaller groups, just not traditionally like on how you remember or how I remember also. And I do think too, I mean, hey, it's a great time to talk about funding, but you know, I think too, didn't that also, when we switched to a coach, it was able to be paid for through, is it Title II funding as well, so that helped. And I think that had something to do with that transition as well, because, and we had a lot of laughs at this meeting because found out that I just realized that I think I emailed Ms. Odom or Dr. 5 years ago over this whole program, so.
Yeah. And, Mr. Chairman, I think it makes sense for us to think about a mid-month meeting. There's a lot of, there's a lot of nuance. There's been a lot of changes to Gifted and Talented over the past few years, and I think it'd be a great opportunity. It does focus more on smaller groups and working with groups of students rather than pulling students out to a separate classroom. And there's sort of a whole different philosophy of learning around that probably be very useful for us to have a broader discussion about.
Ms. Fugit?
Thank you. The only thing I want to say, thank you, Mr. Chair, to the whole board is, let's remember that the policies are meant to be broad and inclusive and give us flexibility. It doesn't mean that we have to do all those things, but we're trying to give ourselves some flexibility, and that the way a program actually works may not use technology, but we don't want to have something in policy that would prohibit us from doing some things that could be good. And so just like us to keep that in mind as we look at these policies. They're written to give us the administration the maximum amount of flexibility.
Good point. Okay, Dr. McIntyre, the interscholastic sports examination.
Yes, sir. Just a few minor changes there. One is to write out the name of the Tennessee Secondary School Athletic Association instead of just TSSAA, and then just a recognition that the name of public health insurance programs in Tennessee might change over time, and so we just said public health insurance instead of TennCare or Cover Kids or whatever the name might be at a particular point in time. So some minor language changes there. And then we're on to item M, which is testing accommodations with students with disabilities. I think this is just some additional language, really, that is based on the guidance and direction that we've received from the Tennessee Department of Education, and also just a reference to the website and the information that's been placed there by the Tennessee Department of Education as well. So I'd be glad to entertain any questions. Those are, I think, all of the those all the first readings?
Yes, I believe it is.
Yeah, so glad to entertain any questions on A.
Ms. Roundtree?
Thank you. Is there any way we could just get the list of the policies that are still to be updated from the first meeting and possibly the second policy meeting that I wasn't able to attend? And then also, were the dates scheduled yet for the next policy review meetings?
They are, and we actually shared those with board members that were present, and it seemed like those dates were workable, so we plan on sharing those as soon as possible with the entire board.
The dates as soon as possible?
Yes.
Okay, and then you all would be able to email us out the policies that are still waiting to be revised?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, moving to N, non-tenure policy. Ms. Dethridge?
Mr. Chair, the only thing I want to say, we duplicating the last sentence, the principal's responsible is also a part of the red. So did you do that for a reason, or?
Ms. Dethridge, I noticed that as well, and I think it was just a matter of how the motion
Right.
occurred last time and how it was accepted, but yeah, I think line item 19 and 20 is probably pretty much covered in line item 6, 7, and 8.
Correct.
And 9, excuse me. So it may on Wednesday be useful to have a vote to correct that, or you could just leave it in there. It's just basically the same language twice.
Yes, so somebody could make an amendment, I guess. Would we have to wait to have a second reading again? We could just amend that? Okay, thank you. O, discussion of possible action on policy BBAB, duties of officers. Ms. Bounds?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was just brought to my attention that I'm actually looking, it's not any change to the agenda. It is line 36 and 37. A chair pro tem shall be elected to preside during a meeting when neither the chair nor the vice chair is present. And it was brought to my attention that that situation could arise this fall because both of our chair and our vice chair will be going off, and there will be no one to conduct the reorganization of the meeting. So if I need to bring a recommendation or a motion on Wednesday, I can, that this board elect a chair pro tem.
Makes sense. Any other comments or questions? Ms. Carson?
I mean, I don't know that we can't do that. I think that's done at the start of the meeting, just to elect it and get the meeting started, so that the board members that are there at that meeting where there is neither a chair or vice chair, that would give the new board members an opportunity to also have a vote in it.
I guess the question would be who would be sitting in the chairman's seat? And it wouldn't matter, there'd just be no chairs, yeah.
I think, anybody at the law department could start the meeting and just call for a vote, or,
Yeah.
Has this situation, because I don't know the history, have we ever had this situation before? Okay,
Not that I'm aware of.
okay. Whatever this board decides,
I think it would
doesn't
be a good
matter
idea to go,
me.
I think it's a good idea to go ahead and appoint somebody, just so they don't have to worry about that confusion, and, at that meeting. I mean, I think it's a great idea.
Well, and realistically, I mean, both of you could be gone between now and then. I mean, probably
Yeah,
not, but
right.
it is a possibility. So anyway, okay, thank you.
Okay. Moving on to grants. Anybody have any questions on A, B, C, or D? No questions? So we'll move on to contracts. 9A, the contract from Denart Construction for Hardin Valley Middle School. Dr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to note that we have representatives from Knox County Purchasing and Knox County Finance, and also, I believe, from the apparent successful bidders. Is that the appropriate term at this point for those two, for both item 9A and 9B here, if there are questions?
Thank you. Any comments, questions? And B, anybody, any questions on A or B, either school? Ms. Carson?
I'll just say, just so that it's, out there, Again, it's my understanding that this has already been, have the contracts been signed?
Yeah, we're saying, yes, we're hearing.
Okay. So, I guess then just, on principle, I will choose not to vote to oppose B, just in the pending investigation of the complaint that was filed. I think it would be wise to spend, I don't know, 30 days or 2 weeks or whatever it takes for the law department to review the complaint and just assure the board that they see no added risk to us. I just think that would be a wise action, but I'm certainly not going to try to persuade anybody to do that. I'm just stating where I will be.
Ms. Roundtree?
I just had a question, and I think Ms. Carson brought this up at our last meeting. So the contracts have already been signed. I guess our vote's just a formality. Is it because of the MOU that the contracts were already signed before they came to us? And I don't know who can answer that question. Anybody? Bueller?
Mr. Law Director, do you have a?
The MOU, which was entered into between the mayor and the Board of Education, Knox County Commission, was passed at June 15 meeting prior to the budget. It amended your budget, amended the county commission's budget, and that's when it was, at that point, approved. And within that MOU, the board agreed that Knox County agreed to undertake a design build of these two schools. And at that point, June 15th meeting and thereafter, Mr. Holt and the purchasing department entered into the putting it out for bids, and it went through that. All this time it's taken to go through the bids, and as he said, the winning bidders are here from Denark and Rouse, but the contracts were, when they were approved by county commission at the last meeting, the winning bid contracts were approved then, and as I understand it, Mr. Holcomb might answer this, as I understand it, funds have already been expended going toward the preliminary part of the construction, getting ready for the groundbreaking. So yes, it's a...
And so they were signed then after the commission vote? I'm just trying to understand the process.
Yeah, the contracts were signed after the commission approved the bidding process that for the winning bidders. And the winning bidders then were submitted, those contracts were submitted to county commission for approval, and they approved.
Was there a reason it wasn't, and this isn't a question for you, Mr. Book, but was there a reason then why it wasn't on our agenda prior? I don't know if anybody has the answer to that either.
Mr. Oakes?
I can tell you it wasn't on the board agenda prior to, because it wasn't, we didn't have contracts prior to the opening, and the work by the Knox County Purchasing Office wasn't complete even on the day we had the last voting board meeting.
Thank you. I just wanted to understand the timeline.
Ms. Dethridge?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question is, and this was brought up at the commission meeting, is that we're not paying for it anyway. So therefore, it's the commission in Knox County that's going to provide the funds for this. So therefore, we don't have to. It's just bringing it to us for courtesy.
No, this comes out of our Knox County Schools budget.
Well, but I'm just saying, that's what I'm saying, but it may be coming through us, pretty much. But
Yeah, it's coming on our budget. It's on our annual budget, fiscal
But
budget.
from Knox County for this purpose only.
Well, all of the funds come from Knox County.
I understand what you're saying. I mean, I was just saying, from what I heard at the commission meeting, it was said that they have purchased or paid for the last couple of schools. So therefore, this is just like a courtesy as far as not having to bring it to us before they sign it. That's all I'm just saying what I heard. And my question is, since we are having an investigation and they do build a school and it may cause resegregation, so Mr. Law Director, is that a possibility?
In my opinion, no. There was never segregation in Knox County pursuant to the OCR going back 25 years or 24 years. There were 2 federal court cases over here one in which Judge Taylor found no, there's no segregation, it's a unitary school district. And then later in 1991, there was a suit brought by some of these same people when they were trying to shut down a plan that the school had, among other things, to close Gibbs. And they went to court and said, no, don't close Gibbs, don't close this school, don't close that school. And Judge Jordan, who's now senior judge over there, looked at it. He said, no, you are not segregated. You are a unitary school district, number one, and the law is this, that judges are not in a shape to tell school boards where they can build schools, and we aren't going to do it. And that is the law across the federal districts.
It's my understanding that as a part of the OCR, it was a part of closing some schools and moving kids and busing kids to integrate. So I don't understand how you can say it was never any segregation.
It was never desegregated. It was never segregated. That is the law. That's the finding of the courts.
That's
The
not
school-
my understanding. Okay.
Well,
We'll just.
we are defending that for Knox County.
Okay.
We are attorneys. We will defend that this district is not segregated. It never has been, and the building of these schools is not going to make it.
Not going to resegregate. Okay. Okay.
Mr.
If you
Chairman,
could-
Mr. Chairman, may I just clarify the funding question, because I think that's
I want to
important?
speak to.
Okay.
Which you can clarify, but my understanding is what the school board did is we said, we're going to pay for 2 schools, and the 2 schools we're going to pay for are Hardin Valley and Gibbs, and the 2 schools we had originally said we would pay for are Hardin Valley and a new elementary school in North Knox County. So my understanding is this is our debt service, this is our everything. This is just like we were building the school, except the county said they would handle the purchasing part of it. And that's what we did in the MOU. Is that correct, Dr. McIntyre?
Well, so just to be clear, so the MOU is here, and the MOU states that Knox County will build the schools, but the debt service will be taken care of on the Hardin Valley Middle School, up to $34.5 million will be included in the capital plan for the Knox County schools, and debt service will be paid by the school system. On the Gibbs Middle School, it would be that the original MOU says that the Gibbs Middle School would not exceed $30 million, and that up to $21 million of that would be paid for by Knox County Schools debt service, and the county would pay the remainder.
So this is not like Carter, when they said
Correct.
they paid for the Carter School and they paid for Hardin Valley Academy.
That's
The
correct.
high school.
That's
These
correct.
are Knox County schools that the Knox County School Board will be part of our debt service.
In
Board of
large measure,
Education.
and again, the
And
Gibbs
will-
Middle School,
My question is, will they be titled to the Knox County Board of Education like other schools, or Knox County? I mean, that's for another day. I know that that's a whole nother subject, but I just want everybody to understand it's the Knox County Board of Education's budget that is paying for these 2 schools. It is not the county commission that's paying for these schools out of other non-school appropriated funds.
that is correct for Hardin Valley
Except for
Middle
3
School
million.
and for the better part of the Gibbs Middle School.
Right.
So most of the Gibbs Middle School will be paid for
Or-
by Knox County Schools debt service funds.
Correct.
Part of it will be paid for by the county.
Thank you.
Ms. Sanger?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Holt, I may have missed this, but the bids for the 2 schools, were they made public? I know that the school board usually looks at all the bids and sees
Yes.
what the lowest bid was. And did I miss that at the county commission meeting?
Yes,
Or when was that?
the county commission has both of the RFPs and the resulting contracts, and they're incorporated in both of the contracts as attachments.
Okay. Thank you. That's all. And then, I guess, Mr. Butte, I see your point about how they can't tell us where to build schools. I get that. I said, but what worries me is that, yes, we can spend our money on that school right now, and then, so we'll have so many millions of dollars in a school, but then also a possible OCR, complaint, or, that we'd have to pay out. So, I mean, that sort of worries me a little bit. I think also, did you foresee that ever being I guess, our law director isn't here this evening, but did you all talk about that? Was that ever a concern at all to let us know that's a possibility of an OCR complaint with that? Because I know that someone did say too, and that's why, I support, I know that, everyone knows, I voted against the MOU because it did help. It would have helped Powell Elementary portables. It would have helped Inskip and Norwood portables. And I did say too that, had we gone ahead and built that school, that sort of negates the claim or the complaint right there with 95% white students in new construction. So, with all that, did anyone foresee this happening or coming forward, or did we, I just think it's interesting that it's coming forward and it just really wasn't brought up as a potential OCR complaint. And I get the fact that no one can see, that anyone can make a complaint for anything, but I think that's interesting. And I guess the other thing too is there any, can the board as a whole get what the real complaint is, what the questions to be answered are, and what we're compiling to get those? That's a lot, I know, I'm sorry.
Starting at the end, I believe that OCR complaint is about as big a public record that's floating around as anything of late. It's there. It's on the News Sentinel's website. It's everywhere. If you want me to send you a copy of it, I'll be more than happy to do it. The things they request are voluminous, and I will give Russ Oakes incredible amount of credit for in a short time getting a whole bunch of this stuff together. We were on a 10-day time frame and had to ask for additional time because this came over the holidays. Now, keep in mind that this MOU and the agreement that was discussed even before the MOU about building Gibbs and Hardin Valley was way back in June, May and June. And nothing has happened or nobody's brought up a question until the holidays. That's the first time we've seen or heard anything like this. And when we looked at it, we don't have a problem. We sure didn't foresee it. The people that were filing the complaint had 6 months? Never raised an issue about it, never. And then all of a sudden, we get something around the Christmas holidays. So my hat's off to Russ. He's done a heck of a job. There's a lot more to do. We've got 25 years of records, lawsuits, exhibits that we have to gather together and send it to the OCR. So no, we didn't anticipate there'd ever be any problem because the law is federal courts and the OCR is not going to tell you where you can build a school. Okay, that's the sum total of it all. So, and I can't remember what other question you might have had there. Did that answer it?
Yeah, I think you're good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You done? Who was first over here?
Ms. Dethridge.
Ms. Dethridge.
Mr. Chair, I agree that they can't tell you where to build a school, but I do recall during my conversation when we discussed this that I said it could be recognized as resegregation, my exact words during our discussion. So to say that you had no knowledge that this may happen, it's mind-boggling because I mentioned it and said it could have the potential of being so. So we could have looked at that and considered that way before now, and to say that they waited till a holiday, we should have known. And we should have also be prepared for whatever may happen. But it was a part of the conversation. But you're right, they can't tell you where to build schools, but they can also ask you why you picked those certain areas and what the result of that and what implication and what it may cost. So hats off to you, Russ, for all your hard work and dedication, but to say that you have no clue, it was brought up.
Ms. Gabrielson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let's say the OCR, they find something. What's the implication on the county? Obviously, you're representing the county. What happens? Do you stop building? Like, I'm just wondering, how does this go if they find that it is resegregation?
They will not make that finding as such. If they think they have a problem, then they will want to meet with Knox County, with the school board, everybody that's got anything involved in it, and see if there's a way to resolve what they perceive. They're not going to tell you where to build a school or stop building a school or shut a school down. They will not do that, nor will the courts. But we start off with the basic premise that there's a key word in here, unitary school district. That goes way back to Brown versus Board of Education in '54 and everything that happened thereafter. If you were declared to be a unitary school district, you were not segregated. If you were, like down in Mississippi where most of these cases come out, deep, deep segregation. Knox County was never a segregated school system. It was so declared by the OCR, it was so declared by the federal courts. So if you're not segregated, you don't have to go into all these issues that Mississippi and Louisiana and Texas and Arkansas did, and Alabama. But we're a unitary school system. We were then, we are now.
Ms. Carson?
Thank you. I think for me, one of the concerns is not that they can tell us where we can and can't build a school. It's just being wise in moving forward, and making sure that, all of the i's are dotted and the t's crossed before moving forward, because what could potentially happen is it changes drastically how you rezone to meet that new school. And so if you have a building that you haven't broken ground on and it takes 1 month or 2 months delay to just make sure everything's covered, it seems to me that that's a more fiscally responsible move than moving forward and building a building that I think we're going to build anyway, but moving forward and then, 6 months before completion, having some type of finding that mandates incredible shifting of a number of students so that the negative impact on a number of different areas can be tremendously enhanced in something that could have been prevented. I think it's misleading for anybody to think that OCR can say who's going to put a school where. That clearly is within the rights and responsibilities. The only thing that I think that warrants discussion and possible action is just if there ever is a good time to look at it in depth, it seems to me now would be it, or frankly, before county commission signed that contract. And watching that meeting, I think Sam McKenzie tried to address some of these concerns. What he didn't hear, and sometimes it's the omission of the counsel that you get, he didn't hear is, in that MOU, that contract wasn't binding until commission signed the contract. So their chance to put a hold on it for even a short period of time existed then. I think at this point, the action that the board can take is frankly meaningless. So it's just more out of a, you vote with what you think is right, but you know that it's not going to change the outcome.
I would just point out, the law director was on a TV show this Sunday, and he opined that it was going to be several months, that he thought at least before we would know. It's not, I don't think we're going to find out in a couple of months. I mean, it could be 2 or 3 years, so I don't think that there's a realistic expectation that we're going to know how this is going to land in a month or two. So just going to make that point. Any other questions?
I agree. It's going to take several months to get all of the 25 years of documents rounded up and put together to send down to Atlanta, so you're correct.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to Contract 9C, Henry Roofing Company. Any questions? Ms. Hill?
I did have a question about that. $571,000 to upgrade one roof. Am I reading that correctly? Yes. I don't understand why that expense is quite so high. That's not even a particularly large school.
That's, it is, it's quite expensive. Yeah, if you get to a large school, it can be $1 million plus for a roof.
Mr. Dillingham's chomping at the bit.
Yeah, Mr. Dillingham and Mr. Oakes certainly speak to that.
Yes, I will tell you, we went through the bid process, and this is about average of what we spend on doing a re-roof on a school per square foot cost. It's roughly $7 a square foot, and that's about what we typically see in a rebid, or in a bid process for a re-roof.
Okay, so roof upgrade, it actually is a new roof.
Yes.
It is not, when I see that upgrade, I'm thinking more of a
So we're putting a
patch
brand,
and repair and,
No,
make it better. But
Brand
this
new
is
roof on-
actually the whole new
Yes.
roof. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, 9D. Any questions on it? Mrs. Roundtree?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just curious as to why the Rizzos were just the black and white machines. I know, obviously, for cost savings, but I do know that there are times when color copies have to be run. So I didn't know if those were going places where there was already color machines, color Rizzos available.
Yes, sure. Mr. Chairman, Ms. Roundtree, Mr. Thomas can speak a little bit more about this particular contract. You all voted not that long ago on a new contract for copy machines. This is actually a contract that's sort of what I call a bridge contract, which allows us to keep some of the old machines in the building while we replace them, while we go through our replacement schedule, and allows them. So, Mr. Thomas, I don't know about the specifics of black and white copies versus color copies, but this is a little bit of a different structure of a contract just to allow us to keep those machines while we go through the replacement schedule.
Yes, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Dr. McIntyre, members of the board. You're exactly right. This allows us to replace the copiers and not put the school at a disadvantage. They'll still have access to color copiers with these Rizzos, so there'd be no change there. We did look, if you recall, we spent roughly $2.4 million, I think, last year budget with copiers, and part of the issue with the color copies, of course, they're more expensive than black and white. What we're asking schools to do, the default on it is going to be black and white. However, they'll still be able to call the shot on that if they wish to make color copies. Just to give you, for example, a lot of times that someone may make a copy, and if there's a link to a website, it comes out in blue, then we get charged for a color copy for that. So we're trying to take steps to really eliminate some of the color that's been done probably inadvertently, I guess, and it's going to allow us to save money. But we looked at actually Liz McLeod and her staff looked at all the copies, I guess, made by each school in fiscal year 15, and we kind of set that as a standard. So the number of copies that each school will be awarded would be on the type of copy machine that they have, the student population, and that sort of thing. So it was just an oversight, I think, on back when we had the new contract, that we didn't have an amendment or didn't have a provision in there to, as Dr. McIntyre said, to bridge the contract so that a school is not without a copy machine while we're in this replacement cycle. They will all be replaced by July. I think there's 30 scheduled for March, 20 for April, 20 for May, 30 for June, and then 58 in July. So we'll get them all replaced so that next year we will not have that charge.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Etheridge.
May I ask a quick question? My understanding that due to the new contract that the school system, each school is responsible for a certain amount of money out of their budget to take care of some of this now, which they didn't have before?
Well, we didn't do as good a job with assessing the schools for the excess charges before. The school system had just made up those charges. What we did is we looked at the FY15 copies that they made, and if they were to make a similar amount of color copies, then yes, that could possibly be a charge. But what we did is allotted them a number of copies. It's just we reduced the number of color copies. So they should not, we were very liberal with that. They should not have or should not see an assessment. We are going around, Robin Lane, our business services supervisor who's back there, and her staff, we're going around to each principal, sitting down with the principal and going over that. So that was mainly for an illustrative purpose, I guess, to say, hey, if you made 64,000 color copies, this is what it would would cost. But I think we've been very generous, and we're not expecting or anticipating seeing schools to have a charge. Now, one other thing we're looking at, if there's a special program in a school that we haven't accounted for that, then we're going to make an amendment to the number of copies that they are awarded. Like, for example, one school we were looking at, that preschool program, it's also a community school, and that wasn't taken into consideration when the allotment was provided. But as we sit down with those principals and get that information, we will make a determination that hopefully will allow them to not have any charge. That's the goal, to reduce the budget and then still not have schools to have a charge.
Okay, good, because I just heard some of the principals getting very kind of nervous because they was hit with $15,000 they had not planned.
I think they're seeing that bottom line, like, for example, as I mentioned, if I had 64,000 color copies, then I see that charge. But when we talked with the principals, there didn't really seem to be that much of a concern between the black and white and color, that they thought they could function with the black and white. And again, we're not taking color totally away. We're just trying to reduce those. And it will still be a decision that can be made at the school level. But the default on the copy machine will be black and white.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
Yes, sir.
And then finally, 9E. Mowing the lawn. Okay. I think we're going to take a 10-minute break, so we'll come back at 6:41 and then move through the last part of our agenda. Thank you. Get started again. Okay, moving on to regular agenda items, 10A. Approve appointment of members to the Knox County Schools Management Team for collaborative conferencing. Dr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are ramping up the collaborative conferencing conversation this spring, and so I thought it'd be time for me to bring back a recommendation to the board around the management team to represent the Board of Education. You have before you my recommendation. It's largely the same team as in prior years, except Dr. Miller, of course, has moved on, and I've put a couple of alternates in there as well in case others, for some reason are unable to serve as well. We've tried to make sure that we have a variety of individuals who have a variety of experiences, backgrounds, represent different parts of the community, and so hopefully have struck a balance there.
Any questions? Ms. Hill? Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Who are the alternates? How does that break out?
So if you look at the, and I apologize, there's two documents there. One is the old one from 2014. If you look at recommendation memorandum, it's the second document.
I'm sorry.
That's actually
Gotcha.
the operative document.
Oh, I apologize. I was looking at the old one.
So Brad Quorum and Ryan Seeby would be the alternates, and the other 9 members are listed there.
Okay. So move on to 10B, the gift agreement with the Haslam Foundation for educational purposes. Any questions on that? Dr. McIntyre?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So 10B and 10C are related. Those are both part of the gift from the Haslam family and from Pilot Flying J. There's both an athletic and an academic component to it. 10B is the academic component, and this is where each of our traditional comprehensive high schools will receive $100,000 to utilize for academic support, and there's a sort of a grant and approval process that goes along with that. And then 10C is the construction agreement with Field of Dreams Incorporated, which is a nonprofit that's been created for this particular initiative, and Baseline Sports Construction, who will do the work. And the way that is structured is this is a gift to the Knox County Schools of artificial turf fields, and rather than receiving any monetary value, we will actually just receive the field, and this would be to approve moving forward with that construction. And of course, we do have representatives both of Field of Dreams Incorporated and Baseline Sports here with us if there are any questions.
Ms. Roundtree?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is just more about the funds to each high school, the $100,000 for the academic portion. Is there a rubric or any parameters in place to give guidance to the high schools, or how will they come to the decision about what they're going to use those funds for?
It's really meant to be organic and come from the schools themselves. It's meant to be a proposal from the school principal to the Haslam Family Foundation, and of course we'll have some ability to look at those and review them and make sure they're aligned with the goals and objectives of Knox County Schools and of the school board, and then the Haslam Family Foundation will also sort of look at that proposal and review it and approve it and fund what the principal's looking for. But no, it's pretty flexible, and I think it's intended to be that way, to really recognize that there might be different ways that each of those schools might best support academic success in their schools, and that the principal is probably the best person to identify how best to use those resources.
And so that would be coming back, the different proposals will be coming back before the board then? Is that what I heard you say?
I don't know if the different proposals will be coming back before the board, though certainly we're going to take, we'll take a look at those and facilitate the conversation with the Haslam Family Foundation. Mr. Oakes, I don't know if you have a thought on that, what that process would look like.
We had not supposed that the individual proposals would come back to the board, but if the schools are buying items with these funds that would cost more than $10,000, which is the threshold for board approval, then those purchases would have to come back before the board.
Thank you. And I just want to, it'd be a great thing if all the libraries that don't have them could think about taking some of their funds and using it to make their library a maker space.
Ms. Carson?
Yeah, I just have truly a question out of ignorance of how these tracks are made, but the latex running track surface, are they always, I mean, is that the standard that they're all latex, or? I'm just questioning with the,
Mr.
you know,
Ferguson,
recent onslaught of latex allergies in so many people. Is that just the standard, or is there other surface available?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Ms. Carson, my name's Will Ferguson. I'm with Baseline Sports Construction. With regard to the latex, it is the binder that holds the rubber together, and every track that we've installed for Knox County over the last 10, 12 years have all been latex tracks. Once the binder is down and cured, there's really not any exposure that we're familiar with or aware of that would affect anybody with any type of allergies.
So that's what we've been using, and clearly we haven't had any problems. So, okay, that helps. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Ms. Sanger?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do think, I was actually fortunate enough to go and sit in on one of the the meetings with the football field and everything, and we had talked about the academic portion, and we had talked about whether or not the schools should bring it back before the board, and we talked about certain deadlines to get it onto the agenda to let schools purchase these things as soon as possible. But I know this past year we've talked over and over again about how we want to see how, if we're getting grants, what schools are getting them, and also how we're using them and what we're purchasing with. And I think just to be consistent with that, I would like to see that come before the board.
Dr. McIntyre?
So this, you have before you the receipt of the gift, and so I'd be certainly willing to do. Obviously, if there are purchases that exceed the thresholds, we'd bring those back. But I'd certainly be willing to bring back the report of what those, what the intended use is, and how each of those schools have identified how they would utilize those resources. Again, just because of the timing and the structure, I'm not sure how efficient that would be, except to do it after the fact and say, here's what the principals have identified as being the best way to utilize those resources.
Ms. Fugit?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Dr. McIntyre, I understand we have to approve the receipt of gifts. Right. And the receipt of the gift is $100,000 per school to use at their discretion, and the Haslam, that's the essence of the gift. So that's really all we have that's all we're approving today, and that was their parameters, was it not, that the gift would be left to the school to decide?
That they would, that the gift would be left to the schools to make a proposal around how those resources would be utilized.
And
then the foundation would grant those resources,
right.
Correct.
So that's my understanding, is that they're sort of, here's the money, each school, you make your proposal, and in the end, the Haslam Family Foundation approves the grant request for the $100,000 to go to the school, correct? Thank you.
I met with Mr. Ferguson at Bearden High School, excuse me, and got kind of a lowdown on how it works and everything. I just would want him to comment just for a second on how it's really going to be more of a multi-use field now. I don't know if everybody understands that. I've had the opportunity to visit with him, but if he could just take a minute or so just to talk about that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, member of the board. The probably one of the greatest benefits of this type of field or facility is the fact that it can be and is intended to be multi-use. The Haslam Family or Foundation really specified with us that as many game playing lines that we get on there within reason, which is really about 3 2 or 3 sets of lines, that they'd like to see as much utilization of the field as possible, which would include PE classes, it would include the band, it would include outside groups, organization, elementary schools, middle schools who might have activities there. The real key to this is that these fields are very forgiving, and the wear on them is minimal over a period of time, and that the big benefit is utilizing and be able to utilize it quickly after a rain or after any type of weather event. So that's one of the real benefits that you're getting out of this type of field.
Get Ms. Fugit. Oh, Gabriel.
Oh, I was just going
Ms.
to say,
Gabrielson.
like, one of the biggest things that comes to my mind is I play powder puff football for homecoming, and we usually have to plan the practice field because the football coaches don't want us ruining their field for the Friday night game, but with the turf field, that can easily be done, and, like, all our events can be scheduled on the one field.
That's a great point. I was at Carter High School for homecoming this year, and boy, it rained a little bit, and it was a mess. And that's the sort of thing that also I think will be wonderful with these kinds of fields. A little bit of rain won't turn them into mud bowls. So it really is a lot of excitement around it.
Well, and I would add to that the coaches and athletic directors and principals with whom I've talked thus far have all embraced that. They're all understanding of that. They seem to be not only appreciative of the gift, but really understand the concept behind full utilization of it. So you won't have the football coach going out there running off the kids off the field that are throwing frisbee. So,
Ms. Sanger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the meeting, it was really neat too. They allowed the athletic directors and coaches get together too and choose different colors for the fields, for the end zones, different line options, all kinds of different things like that. And it was a really neat process to sort of see how it's all going to come together. And I just want to thank you all for doing that too. And if the board's fine with not, it would be neat. I would like to know what everyone ends up using the $100,000 for. But I'm fine with that as well. Oh, okay. So we have. Yeah. There we go. And Mr. Ferguson, while he's doing that, while Mark's doing that, would you just address the D zones? I learned a bunch of different stuff, but the D zones also, because I think the public will probably have questions about D zones and cost of. Am I correct? Right? I'm naming that right.
You got it right.
Okay.
Right.
Just address that a little bit as well.
Yeah, in track construction parlance, the D zone is the area outside the football field that looks like a D. It's a semicircle that is formed by the inside edge of the track and the football field right near the end of the end zone and the goalpost. So that D zone, typically on most of the fields, contains practice areas. It contains field events for running events, high jump, long jump, shot put, discus, that type of thing. And so in some respects, those D zones, while they're not being addressed in this, if you'll notice in the pictures, they were really addressing the football field. And the D zones are outside of that area, and therefore, other than access onto the field, as well as some site work, some grading to be able to match elevations once we cut the fields down to get them to the proper elevations, we're not really going to do any structural damage or any change to those D zones. However, it is certainly possible, and with your approval, I'm sure it's conceivable that some of the schools may come back and want to do something more with those D zones. I know one school has talked about actually paving the area so that they kind of eliminate all the grass that's out there and they don't have to worry about maintenance on what's left of the grass. Some schools may talk about extending the turf to all the way include all those D areas. There's obviously a cost associated with that, and at this point, that's not a part of the proposal or part of the contract or the agreement or the package, and so there is additional cost to that.
Great. Ms. Fugit?
Thank you. Not to be Debbie Downer now, but I've got my banker hat on. So we get this gift. What's the estimated useful life? What's the kind of repair cost? How, because it's ours. It's like any gift. It's like playgrounds and that kind of stuff. Once we get them, we're liable for them. Anything that happens, if anybody gets hurt or sues or whatever, they're ours. And so I'm trying to understand, also long-term budget ramifications of replacement, how often they have to be repaired, that kind of thing.
Sure, that's a great question. The warranty period on the field is 8 years, and it's a limited warranty. 10 years is the sort of industry standard expectation. And what we've recommended is a maintenance protocol that is included, and I think it was included in the package that was delivered to you, but a maintenance protocol that requires a 3-year, what we would call inspection, cleaning, decompaction, testing to determine what the condition of the field is, because the fields will tighten up or they'll get a little firmer as time goes on. And so we're proposing it every 3 years, on 3, 6, and 9 years, that we come back and do this under a separate maintenance agreement with the Knox County School Board. What the effect of this is that if 8 years is the warranty period, we're going to do the inspection at 9 years. 10 years is the expected life. We'd like to get 12 years out of it. And so we feel like if we do that decompaction every 3 years, 3, 6, 9, that it's conceivable that we can push the limit a little bit on how long you can expect to have these fields and extend the benefit of them to 12 years.
And then we would have to be replacing all the fields at 12 years from now.
Well, certainly not all at once. In theory, they're going to last more or less the same depending upon utilization, depending upon certain conditions. Some of the fields, at least one of the fields is in a floodplain, so that could conceivably impact it a little bit. Although the nice thing about this is you wash the field off and you're kind of back in business.
So, I'm sorry, so we're going to install these over how many months?
3-year period.
3-year period,
Mhm.
so.
4 to
so
5 this year.
In 12 years, we'd be replacing a third, a third, a third. So 12 years out, that becomes a capital expenditure for us to redo. I mean, I'm not saying we're not going to take it. I'm just saying, let's be real, folks. It's going to be a cost
Yeah, and I
that we
think
have to do. I know there's grass mowing costs and all that kind of stuff that we've got now, but I just want us to be aware that.
It possibly could. There have been some discussions which are not a part of the contract from the Haslam family that there might be an interest of them providing the resurfacing in 12 years.
But that's
an if.
But that's an if.
That is an if.
And how much do they cost?
It depends, of course, over the course of time, the cost will go up, but you're looking at about $400,000 per field.
Okay, so it'd be about 1.2 million for
3
3 fields.
3 years. Well, 1.6 because you're going to have 4.
Okay.
Right.
So
So we do have a little bit of time as we go through the process. I'm hopeful that the if becomes a win, but I can't guarantee that right now.
No, and no one can, and that's why I think we need to be cognizant of
Absolutely.
that every time. I'm not saying we're grateful for the gift, but I just think people need to be cognizant of the fact
Absolutely.
that it's a very generous gift because it's expensive, and replacing them will be as well. But I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. And there are, as Will was talking about, by the way, I'm Mark Packer to everyone. There are some options beyond the D zone. One thing that the D zone will probably not come into play per se, because I don't know that anyone's going to spend the money to do the D zone. The one customization, everyone in the name of fairness, trust me, in dealing with athletic directors and head coaches for 20 years, I understand that if you give a gift, it's got to be the same for everybody. Everyone looks at everyone else's field. Everyone's going to compare what others got. So the parameters of every field and what's being offered are the same to every one of the 13 schools. How far it goes behind the end zone, how far it goes to the sides, the colors that are offered, the colors of the end zones. The only thing that's different, everyone is being offered essentially their letter at midfield. Okay, Farragut gets an F, Bearden gets a B, Powell gets a P, so on down the line. The options are for a custom logo at midfield, which would fall onto essentially the booster club. The 2 schools already have expressed an interest in having a custom logo at midfield of the first ones in the first year. Farragut wants a star at midfield. That's their logo. Powell wants a panther paw at midfield. Those are up to them to come up with those funds on their own to do the custom logo at midfield. Other than that, Fulton, Bearden, and Central have essentially said that they will take just the letter at midfield. Each school is being offered 3 sets of lines, as Will was alluding to. Football is a guaranteed set of line. They can choose soccer if they choose, or lacrosse. So the gift provides for 3 sets of lines on their fields. So just wanted to let you all know the options that are out there, and the only one I think anybody will take is the midfield logo.
Thank you, Ms. Bounds.
These are just some personal comments, and it doesn't surprise me, having lived in Powell all these years. We take our sports very seriously, and they would be one of the 2 schools that wanted to customize, and they do have a great booster club. Thank you to you all. We were at the basketball game the other night, and I think they had 4 prototypes out in the lobby, and to the best of my ability, I did not stop and ask. I think they were letting the community vote on some of those, so they had 4 different views up for the community to look at and get their involvement and participation, which I really liked. And the other thing is the amount of savings to our athletic directors and coaches and booster clubs, because we were fortunate, our boys played for Clark Duncan, and rarely did we ever see Clark Duncan off of that field. No matter how early in the morning or late at night, he was mowing, he was manicuring, he was doing everything. And then the booster club for years, some good friends of ours, every week they're out there painting those lines onto that field, and that's parents and volunteers. They don't just magically appear. So it is going to be a tremendous, as far as work and effort like that, it will take a lot of work. Maybe the coaches can coach more and teach more, because they're not going to be maintaining the fields.
Several coaches have mentioned that it will give them more family time. That Wes Jones at Hardin Valley said that, he sees his kids during football season when they're on a lawnmower with him, mowing the field. So it's going to be a real positive. But the biggest positive is the coach doesn't have to be the police officer to say to the marching band, you can't practice on this field because I have a game Friday night, and now they can march and they can actually go to the lines. There are a lot of positives to this, and we're really excited about it. And the Haslams to have jumped on board and to do the academic and education component. Mr. Haslam, it was fundamentally important to him that there be a component for academics and education. And the fact that each of the 13 principals can submit what they want, and to have $100,000 towards technology, to buy Chromebooks. I mean, you should have heard Stephanie Thompson at Farragut talk about how this changes their testing time to go from 12 days of testing down to 5, to allow them the opportunity to have 7 more days in the classroom of learning time. I mean, those things, you talk about learning time in the classroom, this gives them much more learning time in the classroom. And I don't want that to be missed through this whole thing of fields and turfs and all that. The academic component will be incredible for our kids for a long, long time to come.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. So we'll move on to 10D, Resolution in Support of Cultural Competency Training. Ms. Roundtree.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the discussion we had at our last meeting, there was some talk about Sydney taking the resolution to the task force meeting, and we had that last week. And Sydney was able to attend the Disparities in Educational Outcomes Task Force meeting as a guest of the task force, and get to talk to those folks about the resolution and why she thought it was important. And it looks like there are 2 different resolutions attached here. So I'm going to let Sydney talk about the changes and any comments she has. But it was, I felt very well received by the task force, and they were very welcoming to Sydney, and they really appreciated her work as a student rep, sort of picking up the torch from Adam and carrying this on and trying to get it before the board. And I think that she's going to tell you some more about the changes that were made.
Yes, so I did attend the task force meeting, and I was really open to all their comments. As you can see in the draft edit, we updated some of the statistics. They were just like the ones I had were out of date. So we updated that and cited them per Ms. Parsons' request. And then we also, I edited the therefore be it resolved to add that the board supports the task force, but also I chose to keep the enhanced cultural competency a part of the resolution because every community meeting I've attended, that's been one of the largest things they've discussed. Even the task force, I would say we spent 75% of the time discussing possible cultural competency training. So I really thought it was important for the board to really state that they were for it, as well as be held accountable for future recommendations through the task force. And I think that sums up all the edits to the resolution.
Ms. Dethridge?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do appreciate all the work that's been put into this, and I appreciate you going to the meeting as well. But I talked to some members as well as the chair, and they feel like it's still a part of what their recommendation is going to be in May, and that it's just something that they have asked, requested, that you hold up on it, and you refuse to listen to the task force. Now, I'm not sure if they said that to you at the meeting, but and I also talked to some of the members, and they feel like this is a part of their recommendation. These are going to be the same things that's going to come to us again in May, and that that's only 4 months down the road, and I understand we need to support our students. We do support our students, but at the same time, we also have to work with our students to understand that there's compromise and there's a way to get things done. Sometimes it may be premature and it may be something we need to wait on. It may be things we need to work on. But it's not that we don't support our students and we don't support what you're trying to do. I just feel like it's still prior to what the recommendations from the Disparities Task Force is going to do, and that since they already know it's going to be a part of what they're going to recommend, and it's going to be done in May, that we should just hold off and let them do their job and let them report back to us this along with their other recommendations that they're planning to give us. So that's just my point of view on this resolution, and where I still say it's premature.
Thank you. Ms. Roundtree?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gosh, I guess I feel a little bit disappointed on Sydney's behalf that folks that were in the task force didn't feel like they could share that with her then. I felt, I was at the meeting, as was Dr. McIntyre, and Dr. Alves was there, and so was Dr. Davis and Ms. Massey for part of the meeting. And I felt like the folks there were very open, and they had some really great suggestions and changes to the resolution. I didn't leave with the sense that, you know, when I talked to Sydney, she sounded open to the changes, and I didn't, when we were walking out, I didn't get the sense that folks said, you know, don't do this or we're against this. I mean, I'd love to hear from Sydney because she was the one that was fielding the questions, and that I didn't leave with that.
I mean, I thought they were very responsive to it, from what I gathered, and for the most part, they liked the idea. That's what I gathered from it, but no one had told me I was refusing their comments or anything, from what I gathered.
Well, I don't mean that they refused to comment, but these are comments they had made prior to you coming to the meeting. And no one's not going to come out and try to discourage a student. I mean, they're not going to say anything they felt that would be detrimental to what you're trying to do. But they just felt like this is part of what they're going to recommend anyway. And so, yes, they agreed to what you're doing because it's part of what they're going to recommend anyway. And it's not out of order, and it's not something that's in it. So, but if you want to do a resolution now, they can duplicate it again in May, but it's going to be a part of what they're going to bring to the table.
Ms. Fugit?
Thank you. Ms. Roundtree, I would just say it happens a lot that you go to a meeting and you think everybody agrees with you, and then they talk after the meeting and you find out they didn't. But I, too, have gotten phone calls from folks asking us to wait, saying that they thought it was a little premature. I'm not going to say whether that's right or wrong or not, but I have been contacted by people saying, why is the school board jumping in the middle of this before we finish our work? That's the only comment that I've heard. I don't disagree with what's on here. I'm just saying that I too, got that feedback after the meeting, and I've often been in public meetings where people don't say things publicly, and then they call people after the meeting to share their concerns. So I can see how that might have happened to you.
Dr. McIntyre?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Sydney, I think I think you've clearly taken some of the feedback from that you got at the task force and obviously made some edits here that I think make it a better resolution. There were two in particular pieces of feedback, though, that I don't necessarily see in here. One was a couple of the Hispanic members of the task force said that they didn't really sort of hear or see themselves in the resolution, and I didn't see necessarily any edits that specifically address that. And then the other was, I think there was some concern about the nomenclature around the language around non-IDEA peers, and if there was an opportunity to talk about that using some different language. So those were two specific pieces of feedback that I did not see, but I think you've made some edits here that make it a much better resolution than prior. I think one of the big pieces of feedback you got was around the changing the last whereas to a now therefore, and I think that's important, and that is reflected in your draft here.
And I think in response to that, we did include students of color, which would include the Hispanic population that I think would cover that in this resolution.
Ms. Carson?
Thank you. A number of things. First, just my concerns last month and why I asked for citations is I think when you have a student rep, one of the big reasons that I advocated strongly to start having a student rep on the board is it's an opportunity to teach. And if you read any paper on how to write an effective resolution, it talks about citing your sources. If you're going to use numbers and statistics, make sure they're accurate. And number two, cite them so somebody can go back and validate them. That was it.
No,
it wasn't
I
to create more work or to have something. It's just writing a proper resolution.
No, I definitely agree with that.
Right, I'm just more explaining it for the people who have, those who do the attacks through social media, and that's the purpose of this, so that we write, if you're going to go through the role of trying to come up with a resolution for this board, I think it should be done correctly. It's your opportunity to learn how to affect change. I got here at the conclusion of a press conference, so I guess first I'd like to ask some questions about how did that press conference, tell me about it.
Well, I was approached yesterday by a student from Vine Middle School. I guess I did not know if other board members were contacted, but he approached me, and since it was concerning the resolution that I had helped propose, I agreed to speak at it, but that was really all the information I was given.
So what was the purpose of the press conference?
He just wanted to show that there were community and student support on the resolution.
And do you know who he spoke to show, where's his network of information that he got?
I think he's involved with different organizations around town. I believe, from all I just met him today, so, but he did contact me. And
So, my concern is, first of all, if you're going to have a press conference, professional courtesy, especially if it's a call to action for the board, is to invite the board to have an opportunity to hear what the call to action is. I found it insulting to come in and find that there's a press conference for a call to action for the board that I'll never hear or see, unless somebody in the press plays the whole thing and I can then see it. It seems to me, if you want to effectively, and it's kind of what generates all of this discussion about public forum and things like that, we seem to have lost our ability to understand how to affect change. And yes, you can do it on TV, but my goodness, if not a single board member is invited, how is that effective? How does it work? It just doesn't make sense to me at all. I understand press conferences can be called at the last minute, but as soon as it goes out, it should be. I would have expected to be invited. And if I get an email at the last minute and I understand it's something that's pulled together, then I at least have a choice of whether I can make the effort to be there or not. that choice was taken away from me. And I want students to feel empowered to speak up and represent other students. But I would also say, if you're going to represent other students, you're in a position that at least I know your efforts to get feedback from other students. I have no idea, and it doesn't invalidate what was said, but it could be so much more credible if it's done in a way that I think is more proper. I also think, sometimes it's frankly, it's using students, and I feel strongly about not using students for some type of maneuver or whatever. This is a resolution that the board, that I asked that there be some changes to strengthen it, and I asked that it go before a committee or a task force that's currently working on the concern. I think those are reasonable requests. I don't think it delays it unrealistically. I did hear some concerns from a couple of members of the task force. It doesn't mean anything. I have some concerns still. I find it difficult to make a statement that I am committed, or to commit the entire board through resolution. The board makes a commitment to support the recommendations when I don't know what the recommendations are. Because I know what you're trying to get to. We don't want this task force to do the work that they do, present recommendations to the board, and have them be put in a file cabinet somewhere. I think that's what we're trying to get to.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. But when you're in a resolution, you make a commitment to support the recommendations, and you don't even know what they are. What if one of the recommendations is, this is such a priority, because it will be to that task force, that we will designate X amount of dollars, even if it means cutting teachers, or,
No,
the board's not going to make that commitment ahead of time until you see. Now, if this came after they make their recommendations, and the board has a discussion about them and can see that they absolutely are things that, from a budgetary standpoint, we can do, or from a policy standpoint that we can do, then that board could make the commitment. But to pre-commit to something before you even know what it is, I think it's difficult. I think it's irresponsible on our part. I don't know how else to say it. I'm not opposed to it. I just think there's ways, I think what we're trying to do, and I could be wrong, and correct me if I am, we're trying to push through something that already has a timeline that's really pretty short. And if this existed in a place 2 years ago where nothing was in place, I'd be with you 100% for pushing that timeline, because it was a problem, a significant problem that's not being addressed. But to try to push through what's already a short timeline is almost like an impatience that says it's got to happen now, when a little bit of delay makes it happen jointly where we really know what we're committing to. So there's the concerns that I have. I do want to say, I tremendously appreciate the work you're doing, and I think that it is a great opportunity to learn how to take a big system and try to create some change. But I will say, as much as I hate red tape and bureaucracy, sometimes there's some wisdom to it, because it forces people to slow down a little bit and make sure that that there aren't unintended consequences to promises that are just too open.
Yeah, I really appreciate your concerns. Thank you.
Who is it first over there? Ms. Bounds, you haven't spoken.
Oh, it's okay. I think I was. I did think I don't want to get into the middle of this, for or against the resolution, for or against the press conference, but I will say that I did see out there somewhere where it was being held today, and quite frankly, Sydney, I forgot. But when I got here at 4:30, I did come out and watch the press conference, and there were other board members that could have done the same, that were here, that did not. Now, some people may have had to work, and some people may not have known about it. But I just felt like I needed to say that in light of the conversation, so that's all.
Ms. Roundtree?
I just want, maybe I'm misremembering from the previous meeting, but I thought there was significant discussion about moving that whereas down to the now therefore. And, you know, I think just to hearken back to the timeline of this resolution was first germinated when Adam was our student rep, and Sydney gallantly picked up the torch from him, and I think we've spent a lot of time discussing it, and I know that Sydney has put a tremendous amount of work into it, and I think, you know, I think at this point, on Wednesday night, we'll vote it up or vote it down, but I think that I think there is support in the community for it, and I'm a little disheartened that anyone would have left the task force meeting where Sydney spoke very eloquently, and I also echoed her sentiment that it was not in opposition to their work. It was really in support, you know, in the spirit of support, in the spirit of harmony and compromise. And I just want to say, Sydney, you're doing a great job, and I support your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to the next item. Discussion and possible action on the superintendent search. As y'all requested at the last board meeting, you asked me to come up with some possible solutions on our search. And so one of the first calls I made, as you can see in the memo, was to talk to Dr. Grissom at the TSBA. And she really encouraged us to make this as, you know, not a very lengthy and complicated process. And so we talked a little bit about it, and just based on the dynamics of our board over the last year or two, it seems that the best option might be to nominate someone to go out and talk to potential internal and external candidates and bring that recommendation to the board. I'm willing to do that, not really looking forward to that, and obviously we've got to discuss, even if that's what you all are interested in. If you're not, I guess we could, second option would be look at a small committee that would bring the recommendation. One of the things that she did caution me on that is in this search process is that because this is a temporary position, this is not typically really like a highly sought after position, especially if some of the candidates cannot turn into a permanent superintendent. And so if you make it a very public and lengthy process, there's likelihood that you won't even get some of these individuals to apply. So by picking one person and allowing them to reach out to individuals that obviously everybody on this board knows potential candidates, and frankly, I've already called some of the internal candidates and talked and just kind of tested the waters on who might be interested in seeking this position. And so that's where I am. I'm not looking to try to do some power play, or this is something I think that potentially would be the best solution, but open to suggestions. So, Ms. Bounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, after I received through Terry, received the email about your recommendation, I did call Tammy Grissom late Friday night, and we had a conversation. And just to put it in clarity, the paper today said Tammy Grissom, the TSBA's executive director, recommends the school board authorize Harris to identify and talk with potential and external candidates and make a recommendation to the full board for a vote. But I heard some of the same things that you're sharing that Ms. Grissom said, but she also said in our conversation that there were as many different possible scenarios to how to go about this process as there are school boards in Tennessee, that the TSBA does not have any protocol or anything in place. And so it really is up to just each individual board. And one of the things she said, I think, echoes what happened with the last search, and Ms. Carson, you may be able to validate that, is that lots of times the board will just decide together on an internal candidate. You know, there's not a lot of discussion. Everybody's on the same page. And I think is that kind of what happened last time, Ms. Carson, with Roy Mullins? Or were you on the board at that time?
I was on the board, and I think more that I'd asked the vice chair to basically do what Doug is suggesting, vet out different candidates, and then come back with a recommendation to the board. So I think when that recommendation was presented to the board, there was no objection, but I wouldn't say the board all kind of talked ahead of time and picked
Right.
Roy Mullins. It was the vice chair who looked through, and I think there was one other person that had expressed an interest and then made a recommendation to the board.
Okay, thank you. Well, and I do understand, and in talking with Ms. Grissom and talking with other people, and I too have been kind of informally called some people internally to find out, test the waters, see who would be interested. But I do think that it would be beneficial, and I understand the problem with an entire board and it being public, because as you said, you wouldn't get as many candidates to apply. But I think it's important for the board to be able to meet and hear the answers of how each candidate plans to move the district forward, and then repair the damage and heal the hurts. I mean, as you alluded to in the beginning, because of the composition of this board, you sought out to, you know, as we authorized you to do, to get some ideas. But as far as it being a recommendation, that was not the impression I got, that was her recommendation. That was just one possible way that the board could go about and approach this. And quite frankly, I do have concerns, and you know it's nothing personal, and I do appreciate you saying it's not a power play. But, you know, we talked last month. I mean, first you brought us the MOU, which ties the hands of this board, as Ms. Carson said, with funding for our schools. Secondly, you brought us the questionable extension of the superintendent's contract. And third, you brought the board the agreement by the superintendent's legal team with the conditions for his resignation. And given all of those things, it would just be really hard to trust you to do, especially in light of the fact that you won't be on the board, and the board members that are here are the ones that will have to deal with the interim, whoever that person is that's chosen. And we hope it's, as Tammy said, she said, don't spend a lot of time on this. You need to be looking towards a permanent position because this is an interim. But if I'm not mistaken, didn't Nashville just suspend their search for a superintendent? So while we want this to move quickly, we don't know how quickly we'll be able to find another superintendent. So I just think it is imperative to find someone to serve in that capacity, and I'm just not sure that I would support someone that's not going to be around next year to work with that interim, and that's up for the board to decide, I guess. But those were just some points that I felt like I needed to make on the conversation.
Ms. Roundtree?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like the idea that you mentioned of possibly having a small committee, but after I got your memo, I also reached out to Tammy just to try and find out what a lot of other boards do and what maybe is considered best practice when a situation like this occurs. And she let me know that TSBA, while they do maintain data on superintendent searches, they don't maintain any data on interim directors. And just the one thing that I had a concern about in the memo was regarding internal and external candidates. I think in a district our size and with our budget, I just think it seems like it would be better if we had an internal candidate that could take over and would be willing to serve. And when I did pose the question to her about that, she said oftentimes most boards do end up selecting an internal candidate, but there are situations in which an external candidate, like a retired director, is willing to come in and serve in that interim position. So I know you asked us to, at some point, we're going to put together a list of qualifications, but I would just really like to urge an internal candidate if there are folks that are interested.
Ms. Fugit?
Thank you. Ms. Roundtree, I hear your concerns, but I don't think we should be limited to an internal candidate simply because this very discussion talks about nobody trusts anybody. Nobody trusts anybody. And so the question becomes, I can just see it now, whose camp is which internal candidate in? And so I think, for my way of thinking, a retired community college president, a retired dean, a former director of schools, somebody that this community has absolute faith in their professionalism, their ethics, and the fact that it is going to be a temporary job and they would just keep the wheels running is something we ought to consider. I'm not saying that's what it has to be, but that's why I would say I think we shouldn't limit ourselves, because this very conversation says that nobody trusts anybody, and everybody is questioning who in central office is in whose camp, who's a McIntyreite, who's a whateverite. I mean, I can just see it. And so, and I hate for us to get into that. I think, and I appreciate everybody wanting to do their research and call Ms. Grissom, but the fact that everybody goes behind our board chair to follow up on what he says Ms. Grissom told him speaks volumes about lack of trust. And Ms. Bounds, you know, I disagreed with the MOU. I voted against it. I don't think that, and so I think we can all say that there are things that Mr. Harris has done, things that he brought to us that I disagree with, but that's his prerogative as a chair. He has to do some of that legwork for us, and then we vote yay or nay. So that's what the chair does. And so I don't have a problem with Doug doing it. Contrary to, I mean, I believe the man's heart is in the right place. He's going to leave this board and try to leave it in a better place. And so I just don't want us to spend so much of our energy on the negotiation about an interim that we cause bad feelings as we begin to work for the replacement superintendent. I think that's where we as a board need to spend more of our energy. So, I mean, at this point, I don't really care who does it. The person, and you know, I hope the person's not here for very long. But yeah, but so, I mean, I think the recommendation, as Ms. Carson said, it's always been one person in the past. Last time it was Ms. Buttery, because she was vice chair to you, correct? Mm-hmm. And so that is the way this board has handled selecting an interim in the past.
Ms. Sanger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be open to that, you bringing someone forward. I think, you know, we're sort of throwing around terms too of internal and external, and just to be clear, you know, internal is currently working for KCS, external is not, because I think, you know, Ms. Runtree was, I don't even know if you even call yourself, but you said it should be, we should keep somebody internal, and then you said like somebody who's retired, and so they're not internal anymore. So we just sort of make sure, if we're going through this process, let's make sure that we get it. But, you know, Doug, I'm sorry that Ms. Bounds just attacked you. I said that really just sort of upsets me, because I think that, you know, when we say that about an MOU that, you know, ties our hands, and that you brought that up, Ms. Bounds voted for it and didn't say a word about it. So I voted against it, and you brought it before. So, you know, we can't just keep using things, vote for things, and then use them against people when we were for them or against them. And, you know, I voted against some of you, you brought it forward. What else did you do? The superintendent contracts, I was for those. You know, but I think everybody here just wants to do what's best for kids. And I don't think that we need to just, like when you said at the very end, you're not going to be here forever, like, I would have loved that. I would have just loved that. That was a perfect statement. I get that. But when we start in personal attacks, like, it's how we're talking about public forum and how we're trying to get our public forum to, you know, not do that. And then we're doing it right now. And, you know, I just, you know, we can agree to disagree to be civil to each other, but that's just my opinion, and I apologize on behalf of the board.
Well, I'd just say, I mean, to give Ms. Bounds the benefit of the doubt, I think she's probably, hopefully she was saying, trust my judgment, which I'm sure I've made plenty of mistakes in my life, and that my intent would not to be to do anything devious or, you know, untrustworthy. But, yeah, and as far as, you know, the conversation with Ms. Grissom, I mean, our conversation was confidential, and this is what I ascertained from what she said. And really, it was one person, and it seemed to us that I would have been the likely candidate, but I'd be glad to nominate somebody else for this. If somebody else would rather do this, or if we do something else, I'm fine with that too. So this is just my recommendation. Ms. Bounds?
Oh, I don't know where to begin, as I've sat on this board for the last year and a half, and the talk of civility, I love the way we talk about it, but then we don't always appropriate that ourselves. But I was just basically, not to personally attack Doug, because I have a lot of respect for him, but the last 3 decisions that have greatly impacted the taxpayers and the citizens of Knox County have come to this board, and I realize that that is part of the board, the chairman's position. But all 3 of those decisions that are fact, that's not opinion, were done by Mr. Harris. Whether you agree with them or you don't agree with them, they were all done. And I just remember sitting here at the beginning when I first started on this board talking about and being lectured on how this board works as a board and not as individuals. And yet, you know, we have seen the last 3 major actions that came across through or to this board being done. And I guess really the bottom line, it just comes down to the fact that it's not that I don't trust Mr. Harris's heart or that he will do what's best for children. I just think somebody that's in the position going forward, not myself, I'm not wanting this at all, but someone that we would be better served to have someone that is going to meet the candidates, talk with the candidates, and bring a recommendation forward that will be sitting on the board in September.
Yeah, let me just respond to that. And I guess I underestimate my authority on the board because, according to Ms. Bounds, because it seems like each one of the issues that she talked about, we all vetted them very thoroughly as a board. I have 1 vote last time I checked out of 9. So, I mean, I would totally disagree with her characterization of how I've acted. I mean, I think I've done what I think is best, and I'm one of 9 people on this board, and at the end of the day, we all get a vote, and the MOU was passed. It seemed to be a good thing at the time. I guess it's not now. And the other item she talked about, I think that's the job and the duty of the chairman to bring those contracts together. We can't all sit around 9 people, you know, starting from scratch with a contract. That's the job at the board meeting, is to vet it. And we took 3 hours on the renewal. So we all have our opinions, but I would disagree with that characterization. Ms. Carson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We can spend our time talking about talking and not get anywhere, or we can look at the issue, which is how do we select an interim superintendent? And I appreciate your initiative in bringing forward a proposal. I would say if any board member wants a different proposal, they should bring it forward to the board. You know, I frequently see those people that take initiative then being for more than what it is. You know, frankly, the MOU, you were not board chair then. You as a board member took the initiative to go do something that you did, and the board then voted for it. But I will say this, you know, I don't want to characterize it as the board has always had a single person kind of vet it, because I only know one time. So, you know, in the one before that, I have no idea how they chose an interim. And so I don't know that there is an always. I will say that if there is a way to, it seems to me the person who goes and just looks at those possibilities and brings back their recommendation to the board, if given criteria beforehand. So we want to know, let's say board member Z, because I don't think anybody has a Z in their name here. Board member Z becomes the person who's going to go out and help vet those who are willing to be an interim. you know, the board can give them those, you know, first, are you willing to do it? Second, give me your CV so I can bring back the board. They know what experience you have in all areas. You know, third, what would be your baseline plan? And then look at what the board is saying they want, then I think it's quite doable that somebody can do that without bias, remembering that when you come back, the board just votes up or down. I think what you want to avoid is having 3 internal candidates who all are intending to stay here and continue to work, be pitted against each other for an interim position. I think it's smart to do that for a permanent position. But I think, you know, when you're trying to move forward and just keep the school system moving in the right direction while you're searching for your director, I think you have to be very careful about how you keep that team together. I would very much not say, you know, internal only, because your pool of available people may be very limited because, again, they may wish to apply for the job. So, you know, I can't imagine any external ones right now, but I don't want to be limited by what I can't imagine. I think, again, this is just a great time for the board to decide what do we want to do and how do we want to move forward and not get into anything personal. You know, just let's stick to the job in front of us. The job in front of us is to pull together as 9 members and select an interim candidate. And I can say that there's nothing about what I've witnessed here tonight in this discussion that I think has people in the school system saying, pick me for that job. You know, I object strongly to the continual persona of, we need to get somebody in here who's going to heal the hurt. We're not abused children. The school system hasn't been abused. And I think when we continue to repeat that, it sends a message that I absolutely disagree with. And it's not right. I'm not going to send that message. You know, have there been things that have been done wrong? Have there been things that could have been better? Have there been things that have been done very well? Yes to all of it. And that's going to exist everywhere. I work with abused children. We're not abused. We don't have a hurt that needs to be healed. We might have trust that needs to be built. But it's absolutely, and I've heard more than one person say that, and I know how perception works. It gets said, and it gets repeated, and it gets repeated, and then it's accepted as fact. So I will just be on record as saying, I don't accept it as fact. And I'll say I don't necessarily agree that the person who vets this has to be somebody who's going to remain on the board. Those remaining on the board have got to focus on who are they going to get to lead this district. It's a huge job. It's why when I was chair, when we went through our last search, I asked the vice chair to handle the interim because the other job was so big and was so important. And so, you know, I would suggest, I'm very comfortable with, if you're willing to do this job, you know, that you do it. I would suggest that there be a process open so board members can send in to Terry people that they would like you to consider, so that every person that a board member thinks they might want in that position gets an opportunity to speak with you. And that will take time on your part, but I think it's a worthy investment of time. I would suggest the board come up with criteria of what they're looking for. And don't confuse it with criteria of what we're looking for in our permanent superintendent. Because we can spend a tremendous amount of time on this. And I do agree, it's gotta be somebody who can do the job, because there's gonna be a lot of decisions, and I don't think it'll be a very quick process. You got, you know, of the 4 large school districts, I guess 3, I don't know. You've got Shelby County, that's the only one that has a permanent superintendent right now, and that's only been in effect for what, a year? Something like that. So it's not like there's not other systems that are going to be competing in looking for this. So, you know, I would support that. I also am open to hearing recommendations of other ways they would like to see it done, but at some point we need to just move.
Ms. Roundtree.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief because I think it is wise to move forward. And as I mentioned earlier, I think a small committee is a great way to do it. And I just wanted to address 2 comments that were made specifically in response to my comment. Ms. Sanger, I just said retired. That was what Tammy Grissom said in her email to me. I don't know of anybody retired that's interested. I actually don't know of anybody that's interested, so I might be late to the game and calling folks, and tweet me if you're interested. And I guess the other comment, it's inherent in me. I'm a librarian and I'm a researcher, and when I read Doug's memo, I wanted to find out more information about, if TSBA had information on what interim searches looked like and what superintendent searches looked like. And so I would not have personified that as going behind Doug's back to get additional information. That was just to understand as much as I could about the process so I can do the very best job I can. I mean, I think I've always probably gone above and beyond whatever the amount of research is just because of my own interest in wanting to know all those little details and facts. That's how my brain works, and I think that I want to do the best job I can, and I think if seeking out outside information is not a bad thing. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Ms. Hill?
I would like to suggest, in the spirit of compromise, that this board nominate a committee of 3. Just talking out loud right this minute, perhaps one board member that will not be serving and 2 that will be continuing. That these 3 ask for letters of intent. If someone's interested, to contact one of us, or contact all 3 of us. At the same time, this committee can go out and also seek people. And this committee then can come together at some point. I know it will have to be sunshined, and this committee of 3 can discuss the names that they have. And hopefully, this committee of 3 then can bring a recommendation to the board. And I guess I'd like to make that in the form of a motion.
I'll second it.
We're not voting.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Well, you can do
When I
that
said-
tomorrow.
oh,
Yeah.
all right.
Ms. Carson?
Well, 2 things. Number one of the reasons that I think you direct a chair to do something, and I think it's fine for every board member to do their own research, but you also have to realize that that means, if 9 people are going to call up Tammy, and we can say that's her job, but one of the reasons we directed you to do that was to gather the information out of respect for her time too. Likewise, if I go to internal candidates that I know you said you did some interviewing, Patty, you said you did some interviewing, if I'm doing interviewing too, we might have individuals here who are talking to 7 or 8 or 9 possibly board members. It's just not an efficient amount of time. And so that's the only reason to funnel it. It's not a desire to be the only one with information. It's just a respect for other people's times and the different questions that may be asked. And one of the things we did in the formal interview for a director was we asked every candidate the same questions, because it's really not fair to come to a conclusion with different ones. And I would just say, Terry, I think it's, I think it is truly an attempt to compromise. But I would say if you're going to have a committee of 3, then you just do it open with all 9 members, because a committee of 3 is going to be on TV for everybody to see anyway. When you sunshine it, that's how we do every committee work that we do. The superintendent's evaluation, every bit of committee work we've done has been live on TV at the time, and so to be consistent with that. And if we're going to do that, there's no advantage to a committee of 3 versus vetting in front of the whole board. But I will say I think there is some advantage to not vetting every candidate in front of the whole board, but just letting whoever ends up with a proposed candidate be fully vetted in front of the whole board.
Just one comment. When we do have committees, and certainly it is televised, but there is some wisdom in having a committee as opposed to the full board merely for expediency, to help move things forward. Oftentimes, a committee of 2 or 3 can come to a consensus, perhaps easier than a committee of 9. That's just.
Ms. Fugit?
Thank you. Mr. Harris, maybe the best way to do this is before we start figuring out who's going to do what, perhaps we should all, maybe the first thing we could start is give everybody work on criteria and give it to Ms. Coatney about what we'd like to see in an interim so that she can start compiling that about what characteristics, what we're looking for in the interim. And maybe we'll talk about that some more Monday, but Wednesday, but between now and then, I don't know if you've received any of those, if anybody's given you any ideas, but I think it would be incumbent on, if on Wednesday we decide what we're going to do and who's going to do it, it would be pretty nice if they had some idea where to start with what was important to board members about what they're looking for in an interim. So.
Any other?
Just one.
Okay, Ms. Stanger?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The one thing too, when we're thinking about whether it's committee or someone brings someone up too, is that especially if someone from if someone internally comes, it's almost in my mind like a teacher coming forward and us talking about their pros and cons, and you wouldn't really, I don't know, that might keep people from actually wanting to come forward, because I think, again, everyone has different perspectives of different people's strengths and weaknesses, and I don't know, it might keep people from coming forward, and if they come forward, I don't know if I would publicly enjoy having people tell me what, some may be harsh, some may not. So, it's just, another thing. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there.
When I was doing the research, obviously one of the things that makes this more difficult for our board is we're living under the sunshine law, because, it was article after article that the board, when they were under this circumstance, they went to a private room and just hashed it out. And obviously we can't do that. And so, my sense is there's not a consensus candidate, and I'm afraid that if we hash it out publicly, that it's just not going to be a very good process. But I'll be honest with you, if we can't get consensus on this, I'm not sure I want to do it. I guess, maybe I could, get 5 votes, but if it's just 5 votes, I'm not sure I want to be put in that position as, looking at dividing the board, and, then maybe I'm open to a committee or something too, because, I'm not dying to do this. This is not something. So I'm going to think about it too over the next couple of days. Ms. Dethridge?
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Ms. Fugit that once we come up with the criteria, and whoever, be it you or any one person that may be designated, if anybody's itching to take over, as Doug has said, because if you don't trust Doug to do it as chair, then maybe you want to do it. If you don't want to do it, then let's give him the criteria, what we're looking for, and he would have, I'm sure, a matrix of who matches these things and bring it back to the board. But I'm not going to sit here and talk about whether I believe you're going to do a good job, because I know you will. You're a businessman, you've chaired this committee, this board, and I don't have any problems with some of the things you've done, some of the things I have, but, overall, I would trust you to get this done as long as you have the criteria from the board and you meet what we ask you to do. So if anybody's got problems or don't trust you, then step up to the plate.
All right, so we also on the agenda was to talk about, does anybody have any other comments on the interim search? And you also wanted me to come back on the permanent search, and I definitely got the sense from not just Ms. Grissom, but the other people, that we should move forward fairly quickly on trying to identify a search firm if that's what we want to do. And so I guess we could talk about that again at the next meeting next month. Maybe get some proposals. I'm not sure. I would look to my colleagues to give some advice on that, what you'd like to see. Ms. Carson?
I would just suggest that you put that on the mid-month and see if, if there is, at least let the board know what's out there, what's available for a regional search, for a national search, for a local search. If we could get an idea of how much things cost. So at least everybody knows what options are out there, and then, I guess rather than talk about it every month, after that mid-month, hopefully the board will know whether in the next month they want to make that commitment or they want to wait till September and make that our decision point. And either, I'm not advocating for either. I just don't want to talk about it every month.
Yeah. So and I'm actually going to be missing the mid-month in February, so somebody else, yeah, you can talk about me. But, so yeah, we can do that. We can compile some more detailed information on and kind of move forward on that then. Any other comments or questions on that? All right, our last item is discussion and possible action on the law director's legal opinion. Ms. Carson?
Thank you. I put this on because at the last voting meeting, the board voted to ask for the opinion, and in the discussion, I had asked Mr. Armstrong when he thought by the next voting meeting. I've since gotten correspondence that it still may be Wednesday, so I want to keep it in there so I can see, but at this point, I don't have anything, I haven't gotten anything back on the opinion.
That'll take us to public forum. Ms. Sanger?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our first public speaker is Lauren Hobson.
Lauren Hobson, KCA President, 6513 Foxhound Road. I just want to address a couple of things that were on the agenda tonight. And the first thing I want to address, just as myself, my personal opinion, in regards to the interim superintendent search. I think it really is a matter of optics, to use a term that's kind of been in the media lately. Having one person essentially make the decision for everybody, I just think to our viewing public, will not look very good. I think having a small committee makes it a lot more transparent, and I think, some of the mistrust that Ms. Fugate mentioned, I think can be mitigated by having that happen. So I hope that that's what you guys will decide to do, to at least have a small committee to work on choosing the interim superintendent. The other thing I wanted to address was our issue of public forum, and I guess really what I want to do is just call a spade a spade. Okay, we're not here discussing public forum and ways to change it because we think it's good for our public or because we want to help a new school board. We're here because over the last couple of years, some of you are just frankly tired of people coming to public forum and saying things that are not very pleasant. And as I have stated to several of you on different occasions, if the people who had come to address you in public forum thought that their concerns were being addressed through the proper channels, they wouldn't have shown up. I've been to 70-plus school board meetings in the last 2.5 years, and believe me, I would rather be about anywhere else, and so would the other people who have been here. The number of times that more than 5 or 10 people have spoken to the school board, you can count on one hand probably. So it's not about a huge number of people constantly coming and dragging these meetings out. After all, we've been here 3 hours and we're just now getting to public forum. It's not the speakers at public forum that make these meetings last for 5 hours. So that's really not the issue. Public forum is not what makes these meetings last too long. And I think it's just disingenuous to act like that's the problem. It's also not about how we want to respond to the public, but it's how we are going to limit teachers. We can look at all the changes made to that policy, but the biggest things that stand out to me are all the hoops that teachers are going to have to jump through in order to get their concerns heard. We don't have an ombudsman in Knox County schools, and I wonder why that is, because what has happened is teachers feel like any concerns that they have at some point have gotten stopped up the chain of command. And when the person who has the final say about whether or not you get to speak to the school board is the superintendent, when that may be a person that is responsible for some of the situations, then that's just not workable. I think limiting the time, I mean, that doesn't really make any sense. Just because other school districts have a smaller amount of time doesn't mean that we need to do that. I also agree with Ms. Carson in talking about trying to, group speakers into different issues. Sometimes, people from all over the county who don't even know each other decide to come and talk about a specific issue. There's not really going to be any way for them to get together and decide that they have exactly the same comments. So I agree with Ms. Carson. I don't think that there is a real legitimate way to do that. Also, I think was brought up about, if you had so many speakers, limiting the amount of time from 5 minutes down to 3. I just don't think that's a good idea either, because people have taken a lot of time to prepare their comments and then may at the last minute have to pare things down and not be able to get in what they need to say. I think that's pretty much about it, but I just think we need to be honest about this. It is not about helping the board get through a meeting quicker. It is not about our convenience. It's about limiting the speech of your teachers, period.
I would just like to comment about that as well, that I think there were a couple things that I don't think anyone ever said it was about limiting speech of teachers. I think one thing I always talked about too was civility, because I think what happened has come about is like what we talked about tonight is it's not what you say, but how you say it. We tell our kids, our students that all the time, and I think we just wanted to sort of address that. And then also, we have not changed any of the ways that teachers go about doing anything. I think Ms. Hill and Ms. Deathridge and Ms. Gabrielson can attest to that. We haven't changed anything. We just wanted to make it clear, so just to clarify exactly what those changes were. And we also had some discussion also with Mr. Dupler, one of the attorneys for the law department, about how sometimes if that's not done correctly, it actually can open up, and you can maybe, if you would like to approach this or address this, but opens up teachers to some liability. And so we all talked about it, and I know Ms. Hill, we all talked about it and said, how do we do this? Because we want to make sure that we're doing what is best for our teachers and how everyone can get the results or the information that they would like to have. Is that you remember that?
I wasn't there. If Mr. Dupler's here, I'm not sure exactly what it is you're saying there, but he might.
Yep, we'll debate that later.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. Okay. Also, our second one is Stephen Rogers. It does state in our policy that we can address.
Stephen Rogers, 1120 Pillow Drive. Good evening. Let me first start by reiterating that I recognize how difficult your job is in the position on the board. I respect the time commitment it takes to fully participate as a public servant. Your job is not easy. I do not want to do your job. That's why I'm on this side of the microphone. The proposal to amend complaints and appeals to the board strikes a few chords with me, and yes, that is a band director pun. I tried so hard. Okay, so first, prior to addressing the amendments themselves, the labeling of complaints and appeals warrants being mentioned. I have heard complaint that positive comments are too frequently missing from public forum. The process is labeled complaints and appeals, not high fives and attaboys. As an educator, I assure you, we do not run on compliments as our fuel and our motivation to do the excellent work that we do. If we waited on compliments to fuel us, we'd be out of gas and on cinder blocks in the parking lot. Many people, myself included, have stood before you and brought up some of the issues of teacher morale. And in doing so, the board has reminded speakers about chain of communication issues. And don't get me wrong, I truly believe issues should be handled at the lowest level possible before being moved up to someone else. However, the chain itself is often part of the problem and cannot be addressed without adversely affecting one's work environment, if not career. As a solution to that, I have asked repeatedly and pointed out that we lack an ombudsman process in KCS to handle complaints that would endanger an employee, parent, or student to retribution under our current structure. There are certain things you can safely discuss with people at work. I think most of us avoid politics and religion as a matter of civility. However, there are some times where issues are taking place that you can't talk about not because of civility, but because you don't have the faith that saying something won't harm you professionally. With the overwhelming lack of protections offered teachers amidst controversy, the implicit message is don't rock the boat, loose lips sink ships, and be careful who you vent to. A listening ear is also a running mouth. As an attempt to streamline public forums, some of these changes that are in there present problems, and I understand that most of it is old verbiage, but I would like to offer my opinion about these issues as they are currently presented. Within point 1, the complaint must be submitted in writing to the director of schools 7 days before a regular meeting of the board. When agenda items are posted less than 7 days before a meeting, that automatically defers for a month or a fortnight whatever issue has been brought to light as being part of that agenda. Within point 2, a written account of what steps have been taken. Even if sometimes an individual's tone, and I am absolutely guilty of this, doesn't indicate it, that individual may respect everyone involved and does not wish to taint the waters of opinion against those people in the chain of communication. A written account of all steps may throw someone under the bus when that is certainly not the intent of the person who is bringing up the issue. Within point 4, groups of complainants should delegate one member to serve as a spokesperson for their complaint. And I don't know if you realize this, but people are capable of coming to these similar or same conclusions about issues independently of each other. If 10 people are talking about the same thing at the board forum, it may not be a cabal of underworld Illuminati conspiring to initiate the next phase of their nefarious plot. It may very well just be an issue that's so important 10 people were compelled to speak on it because it's too important to ignore. Within point 5, timely response, I get about 250 emails a day. I miss stuff. I accidentally delete things and don't realize I did it. Stuff goes to the draft folder instead of being sent. I totally realize that that stuff happens. Not every email can be responded to, or not every email even warrants a response. I get that. But when people come with complaint to the board, they're saying something is wrong and it still hasn't been addressed, they're not responding, or they're not saying that as I haven't had my emails responded to. People return to the same topics because they don't see the efforts that are being put forth to address the issue. Yes, those efforts may result in changes that people don't want to see or may not result in the changes they do want to see. But even seeing an issue resolved with an unsatisfactory result at least shows the attention being paid to it. You may not like how an election turns out, but you at least know that the voting process took place. And no one enjoys sitting through long meetings, and with public forum at the end, there are already frayed nerves and impatience sets in. And based on that, I get the concept behind streamlining things, and I really do get that. Meetings with our parent booster situations sometimes can be very long-winded. No one wants to have to deal with it. But the fact that we still have an atmosphere where parents and teachers are coming to me saying, well, I'd say something, but I'm afraid of retaliation, and there's no viable infrastructure for bringing issues to the table currently, any semblance of proper administration channels is unfeasible to get your issues heard, be safe in bringing those issues to the table, or having expectations that those things will be addressed at any level. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next one is, I'm sorry, it's Matt McWhorter? Please state your name and address.
My name is Matt McWhorter. I live at 12952 Sienna Lane in Knoxville. I teach at Bearden High School. I'm also one of the teachers on the representative board that was involved in collaborative conferencing, which produced the MOU that was adopted by this board in December of 2014, and we're looking forward to starting the next round of collaborative conferencing. One of the areas that collaborative conferencing involves is teacher compensation, and that's what I'm here to talk about tonight. I have a feeling that you all would agree that teacher compensation in Knox County is not competitive. And the reason I have that feeling is because you pretty much said that when you adopted the MOU, which states pretty clearly that Knox County teacher compensation is not competitive. And the MOU further stated that it would be the goal over the next 5 years to move teacher compensation in Knox County to either the top 20% of systems in the state or to provide an overall 20% increase in compensation. Moving Knox County teacher compensation to 20% top 20 in the state would currently require somewhere in between 9 and 10% increase. And I want to thank you for that statement, for those words of support. But it is going to take more than just words of support to make that actually happen. And so the reason I'm here tonight is to encourage you to take the next step, which is to provide the action to make this a priority, because the words by themselves won't do it. I understand that the school board is not by itself responsible for this. I understand that the state government and the county government are responsible for providing the funds, and the school board provides or decides what to do with those funds. So I don't hold you singularly responsible for that. I've talked to representatives from both the state government, the county government, and of course school board representatives, and all three of these different groups assure me that they're doing everything they can to try to fix this problem. And I don't doubt their sincerity, but if all three of the groups insist that they're doing everything they can and they're not going to do anything until one of those other groups does something, nothing's going to change. And I know it's difficult, but it's at least as difficult for the other systems in the state that have managed to be able to compensate their teachers more effectively than we have in Knox County. So it can be done. Now, the thing that we need is not for you to try to do the job of the county commission or the state, because you can't, and that's not your responsibility. But what I was told by one county commissioner was that the county commission is not going to provide any more money for teachers' compensation until they see that that's a priority with the school board. And whatever you think of that statement, there's some truth to that, because even though I appreciate the words of support for increasing teacher compensation, since the time the MOU was adopted, I'm having trouble seeing evidence of action that that's a priority. Since that time in December 2014, the action I have seen to establish priorities has been things such as building new middle schools, things such as programs in schools, things such as new contract extensions, and I'm not doubting that you all thought that every time you made those decisions, you were acting in the best interest of students. But I ask you, what could possibly be more in the best interest of students than making sure that Knox County teachers are compensated at levels that will allow us to attract and retain the best teachers we possibly can? That is what needs to be a priority, not just with words, but with actions. And so what I ask you to do is please show us, not with words, but with actions, that increasing teacher compensation in Knox County is a priority. Because if all we get is words, it's going to be hard for me and other teachers to feel like we are valued and respected as professionals. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes, actually, well, I don't see him out there. But is Edward out here? No? Okay. Okay. That concludes our public forum.
Move adjourn.
No.
Board forum. Oh, sorry.
Ms. Gabrielson? Ms. Dethridge? Yes, Ms. Gabrielson?
I just wanted to say, in support of Magnet School Awareness Month, is that what Awareness Month? I attended a magnet school and it was a great experience. And I think if you don't know what a magnet school is, go and look at anyone in the county, because I went for kindergarten and first grade, and I still am friends with all 20 kids who were in my kindergarten class, and we meet on a monthly basis, and we're 12 years later into that. So magnet schools, definitely look into them if you haven't, because they're a lost thing in society.
Ms. Dethridge? Ms. Fugit?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say that I believe last week was School Board Appreciation Week. And I would like to say that I appreciate my fellow school board members. We do not always agree, but I know everybody is here working their hardest, and I know that we've got lots of big decisions ahead of us. And I do appreciate everybody, because, as has often been said, this isn't an easy job. It's often a thankless job. It's often a lose and sleep job. And so I appreciate everyone for serving, because I'm not sure that we hear that very much. So we'll say it to each other.
We appreciate you too. Ms. Carson?
Thank you. I want to just go on record as taking exception to Ms. Hobson's comment about if we're honest about the changes that are being proposed to public forum, it's because we're tired of hearing people come and complain and say things that we don't want. And for me, that is not true at all. First, I didn't make any of these proposed changes. But I will also say that I think my record speaks for itself, and I will say when I was board chair, I worked to bring public forum to the beginning of the agenda and not back of the agenda to recognize people being out there for so long. There were things about that backfired because people talked before we ever had a chance to even know what was on the agenda. I also worked to make sure that public forum was available at every meeting, not just the voting meeting, which is where it used to be. And I very much want to hear what people say. The reason that I think some of these changes are good is that I think there has been a total disregard for appropriate process. And there are many times I see a very strong difference between complaints to the board. You don't need an agenda ahead of time to know what you're going to complain about. You've got a complaint that's already happened. That's separate than public forum. And so I think everything that I've done is said, you know, I value the community input. I just value getting the problems resolved. And I don't think always doing it in 5-minute intervals on TV is the best way. It is a way that works for some instances, but it's not, my interest in this is not at all, and it's a gross assumption to say, if we're honest, the other motive is ours. It's not mine at all.
Ms. Hill? Ms. Sanger?
No.
Ms. Bounds? Ms. Roundtree?
I'll try and be very, very quick. I just wanted to thank Ms. Carson for filling in for me on the Ethics Committee since I had to recuse myself from that. And then I just wanted to very quickly rush through, if anybody's still listening at home, there are still some folks in the audience. This board voted 8-1 that we do not support vouchers. If you've been watching what's been going on in the legislative session in Nashville, then you know that vouchers are set to go to the calendar committee tomorrow. And I just urge everybody that's listening at home, if you love public schools, which every single person sitting on this board should love public schools and want them to succeed, and I know that you do, then you cannot in your heart support vouchers. You know, there are 22 lobbyists in Nashville that are working for vouchers. There were paid speakers that went to the committee meetings. You know, just in doing some quick calculations, vouchers could cost our district $500,000. And if you haven't been to a community school, community schools absolutely work, and they are the answer for our kids. And so really quickly to end on a positive note, I'm going to steal, I like the chair's idea of a quote. I just hope that we can all speak truth in love in this month of love in February.
So
So
can I add one more thing I mentioned?
Yes, Ms. Carson.
Just to add one more thing about the vouchers.
contact your reps.
Is that I appreciate what you're bringing up. I forgot to from the class call, but I will say what's important for people here is not that we voted 8-1. The board voted. That was a board decision, and people don't need to know numbers. I mean, I know what you're trying to say, but the truth is this board made that decision, as did County Commission, and that is on our joint agenda of together both bodies are supporting this, not supporting vouchers.
Thank you for adding that. And just one quick thing. The Tennessee County Commissioners Association director said, and I quote, "Vouchers at the end of the day would be the greatest financial nightmare Tennessee county's ever faced." Call your rep, y'all. Email them. Go to Nashville. Stop vouchers.
This meeting's adjourned.